All right, time to get it cranked up here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody for standing by as I had to switch out a keyboard. Thank you for joining us here at, once again, the Voice of College Football on a Friday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. All broken in today. Plenty of talking, plenty of recording, plenty of live streams. Basically, I have been recording and in this chair since about 10 a.m. this morning. So a lot of great stuff in store for you over the next several days that we've recorded today and the last few days as we've done roster breakdowns. Ohio State, Michigan, Texas A&M, Alabama, Clemson, and others. So be looking out for those roster breakdowns, both the offense and the defense for the best teams in college football with more to come. Just posted a video on the Arizona State scandal involving Herm Edwards and his coaching staff. We had Michelle Gardner from Arizona Republic on to break down the current status of what's going on with Arizona State and the NCAA investigation. Also, plenty of live streams coming your way each and every day here at the Voice of College Football every day. So I counted up, we've got six scheduled live streams in addition to the call-in show, scheduled live streams each week between Ohio State, Florida State, Miami, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and we've thrown in Oregon a number of times over the past few weeks. Of course, I'm going to get to your comments, your questions, your debate topics that you leave in the comments section. The phone lines will be open as well at 860-499-3332. Also, keep in mind that at some point in the show, I'm going to let you know what our big announcement is for opening weekend of the college football season, with many more announcements to come. I'm working on plans to get things cranked up here at the Voice of College Football for 2021. We treat the off season like it is in season, as you well know. We crank out more content than anyone, over 22 channels. But once the season ramps up, we are going to be full bore, nonstop, full throttle, crushing it with your help. We can't do it without you. So we have some good things planned for opening weekend in particular. And then in the next several weeks, I hope once I get a few things finalized involving a number of people that I am able to make an announcement concerning what will be provided for all of you for the college football season. All right. Let's get down to it. And before I pull the Amazon ticker and leave you with the phone number for tonight's call-in show, 860-499-3332, what am I going to do? I'm going to remind you that when you shop Amazon, which I know that half of America does each month, that is just insane to me. Not half of America shops at Walmart every month. Not half of America goes to McDonald's every month. Not half of America does about anything each month, but half of America buys something at Amazon every month. Therefore, when you do that, please use the link in the description section of the videos. That way, we benefit, you benefit, because it's the same shopping experience. And if you like what we do here at the Voice of College Football, you're basically ensuring that we will stay right here producing college football content for you. You know, I'm always available regarding requests. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And concerning sponsorships, if you have any leads on sponsorships, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right. What is this beautiful, beautiful piece of art that I see behind me here? Maybe it's not set up or draped quite correctly. Blame my set designer. They've been slacking. My set designer, my stage manager, not quite up to the standard of the channel right now, but nonetheless, that is the beautiful Voice of College Football long sleeve t-shirt. And so if anybody's interested in the Voice of College Football merchandise, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. I'm trying to get a feel for what should be ordered before we make everything available on a regular basis. So we are working toward making a number of items available on a regular basis. But until we get to that point, let me know when we make these initial orders so we can do those in the most efficient and effective manner economically. That let me know colors, styles, sizes, that sort of thing. I'm thinking with the logo in black, red, and silver. It goes well with a red t-shirt, goes well with black, goes well with white, goes well with silver. But if you want something else, if for some reason you want to display the Voice of College Football logo up against your Clemson orange, hey, let me know that too. But I would think red, black, silver, and white would be the options there. Also, long sleeves t-shirt, short sleeves. It's summertime, of course. And then we've got possibly a polo shirt and hoodies that we could provide as well. So again, MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And I'll probably also solicit feedback on a poll on the channel. Oklahoma Sooner fans, hope you joined our show this afternoon. OU Live at 2:30 Eastern every Friday on our Oklahoma channel. That was a good time with Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football. All right, let's get to it. Navy Thomas, right time, right date. Hey, Sue, good to see you as well. Navy Thomas standing by, always good to see what I like to call the, at least from an active membership standpoint, the original Navy Thomas. Between Navy Thomas and NCIS Fanatic 21, those are the two that I think are the most active, longest running subscribers to the Voice of College Football. Mike 3883, good to see you. As well as we've got H-Man 998. Roberto LeBron, good to see you, Roberto. So when's kickoff? Who do the Buckeyes play first? Yes, kickoff as in the kickoff of the college football season. In regards to who the Buckeyes play first, Google, maybe? I think that would work. Roberto has been watching the 2005 Texas-Colorado game, second half right now on YouTube. That wouldn't have been one of those ridiculous 49-3. I think it was 70-3. That's my guess. The 2005 was, of course, the year that Vince Young in Texas won the national championship, and they completely embarrassed and obliterated Colorado in the Big 12 championship game. 70-3, correct? Roberto, chime in. Let me know. I think that was the 70-3 year. Alabama football fan, roll tide. Roll tide. Good evening to you. Great to see you. Sir, I believe, sir. I shouldn't assume. We've got Cheryl, we've got Sue, we've got Melissa. I've seen a few other female names recently out of my 6% viewership. Female. It's holding steady at 6%. Would love to see it go up, but we're holding steady at 6% according to YouTube. Mike 3883, I feel like Arizona State gets hit hard to overcompensate their lack of NIL power. I don't understand the logic there, but would it surprise me? No, because the NCAA is involved still. The NCAA is close to extinction, but still involved, still running investigations. Alabama football fan, roll tide. Thank you for, of course, reminding everyone to hit the like button. Does it make me feel better? Does it matter? It shouldn't, but that's the way YouTube works. Our goal with these videos and these live streams would be to get the videos and the live streams in the suggested videos column. then they blow up after that. If you can get your videos in the suggested videos column for tons of people out there, those are most of the time the videos that people select. So that's one of the ways you can help us do that. Hey, Tim. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Tom Winfield. Great to see you. Appreciate that. And even though I've got my screen blown up quite a bit, no contacts. I've been without glasses for quite a long time, I've got to admit. So since I left the Worldwide Leader, I continued the medical coverage, but I kind of slacked off and let the dental and the optical, the vision coverage go. I'll pick that up at some time here soon, maybe. But reducing expenses, kind of let the vision, let the dental go for a while. And my glasses have been broken for quite some time, and therefore they're not available. And sometimes I just don't mess with the contacts. So the screen's like 800 times larger than it's supposed to be. All right. Roberto, if half of America watched college football, that would be good news for me. If a quarter of America watched college football, that would be great news for me. I got to think maybe like 8 to 10% of America watches college football. If you look at the grand scheme of things and compare it to things like major motion pictures or major television shows, even in this day and age, there are a few television shows out there once in a while. I wouldn't know what those are because of my television habits, but even in the year of 2021, that there still is some pull to television. But especially in music. Music would be the one common denominator that links almost all of us. I basically know one individual that I can think of, maybe two individuals who don't like music. Everybody likes music. And so that would be the one thing that when you say half of America watches college football, I wish. But just about 99% of America listens to music. Now, different kinds of music, of course, but that would be the one thing that I would say is the most popular form of entertainment, the most popular recreation, the most popular of anything besides eating, and we have to eat. Southern Six. Good to see you. This is the first time I believe I've noticed you in the live chat. So welcome to MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. I apologize that I did not give you a very energetic and the typical, you know what? I got to correct that. I've got to make up for that, Southern Six. Hang on just a second. Southern Six, this is the first time I've seen your handle here, so you deserve a hearty welcome. Welcome to MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Southern Six, would love to know how long you've been watching and who you root for. Okay. Oh, your question was where I get the mini helmets. So the mini helmets were purchased online. Somebody where I used to work, a friend of mine, used to purchase mini helmets, and he got me some kind of deal. There's a couple standard. These are Schutt. Yes, these are the Schutt brand. And they're pretty, I think they're an industry standard, pretty quality mini helmet here. And I have not purchased any in a long time. So who should probably be the next in line for a mini helmet for the set? Understanding that we've got Ohio State, Michigan, Wisconsin in the Big Ten, Oklahoma, Texas out of the Big 12, USC and Washington out of the Pac-12. We've got Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Florida, LSU in the SEC, Clemson, Miami, Florida State out of the ACC, and Notre Dame. I believe that's everybody. And Kent State out of the group of 5 out of the MAC. Well done, Kent State. Who should we... I have a very definite answer to this question of who in the hierarchy of college football currently should be the next helmet. And I really believe there's about 4, I will say 5 helmets that I should get. 2, 4, 5, I'd say 6 that I should get. It's not a real priority or high priority, so don't expect that unless somebody purchases these for me that they're going to be there in the next year. We've got other things we're working on besides the helmet display. All right. Mike talking about Uncle Lou. I haven't seen Uncle Lou for a while. He was on a couple months ago. I didn't know that Uncle Lou had a mini college football collection. I wouldn't even call mine a collection. I've only got about 20, something like that. Wouldn't call it a collection. I'm very appreciative of the 2 people that have told me that we've had a great show tonight. We haven't done anything yet, but thank you so much. You have faith in me. Have faith in us pulling together a great show tonight. Well, there's a couple things I'd like to get to, but I wanted to go through the comments. First, of course, Mike, the last time we did a Miami live stream, or the last time we did, I don't remember specifically what stream it was. It might have been the last time we did a call-in show. I believe Mike was our lone contributor. So thank you so much for that, Mike. Appreciate that. So we can keep you company. We can always do that. And everybody here in the live chat, of course. D-Rock Irish is on the line, as is George. Good to see all of you. D-Rock Irish, good evening, everyone. A bit late, just checked in on Mark Rogers TV podcast regarding the Arizona State investigation. Check it out and go Irish. Thank you so much for the promotion, D-Rock. And for anybody who missed the notification came like 10 minutes before I went live. So my apologies for that. I really should work on a schedule, but man, I am posting content all over the place. For any of you who are subscribed to more than just the main channel, you're subscribed to the other 22 or a portion of the other 22. I think you understand that I'm constantly recording and editing. So the live stream schedule is something that we were able to stick to a couple of years ago during the off season and in season. And I really need to pull that together because that would help all of you, of course, know, okay, it's Wednesday at 8. That's the one time frame that I've been able to commit to for a long time. Is Wednesday at 8 Eastern. I've been here. But the other ones I know that I'm floating around, and I try to make them sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes at night, sometimes late night. We used to do a lot of late night shows. Maybe I should do those more frequently because we used to have some great late night shows. I used to be shocked at how many people would be on here at 2 in the morning. Oh, so Roberto's not watching the Big 12 championship game from 2005. He's watching the regular season game. You guys are really taking in the old games here. David took in the 2018 Rose Bowl. You know what I keep telling myself almost every day is there are 2 things I want to be able to do that are related to the business, but are more of the fan part of the business. So you guys understand that in building this channel, running the business, there's a lot of things that you have to do that are actual work. But the fun part of it is talking to all of you and then researching the teams and the games and watching the games. Obviously, that's the fun. I would like to do more of the fun because, I've got all these. I got to really prepare for the season. I need to basically digest these whole. And I've got Phil Steele's magazine coming soon. And I was just sent the Michigan Rivals publication. So I appreciate them sending me a complimentary copy of their publication. And I will be displaying that soon. It just came in the mail today. But I need to digest those. And I just haven't taken the time. When I say I haven't taken the time, I really haven't had the time. I've been editing until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But then also watching, every time you guys bring up watching an old game, I think, man, I'd like to watch some old games. And then I also think, and it's too late in the off season to do this now because the season's about to start, but next off season, I think it would be phenomenal for us to review the best games of the previous season. So after the national championship game, to review the key games of the 2021 season, put up the big monitor, or I'll put it in some kind of, I need like an OBS application, a picture in picture, and to review the best games of the season. That'd be cool. All right. Oh, the reading glasses. Well, see, Sue, when you get as old as me, there's an issue. There's an issue because every situation requires a different vision standard, different vision application. So what happens is that if I'm just going to read, if I'm going to read this magazine, the best thing possible is for me to have nothing in my eyes because I can read this. This print in Lindy's is tiny, but I can read it. Perfect. Or if I've got a little medicine bottle, want that thing right in my face and nothing in my eyes. Perfect. But to read that, I should have my contacts in. But if I've got my contacts in and I want to read this magazine, forget it. I took these magazines on a recent trip, but I had my contacts in the whole time. They were useless. I couldn't read them. I'm holding them back, and it was just impossible. So the reading glasses only work if they really don't work for too much. Maybe for reading recipes or medicine bottles. I don't take a whole lot of medicine that requires any kind of reading. But I get your point. But for me, it's a different situation all the time. The glasses sometimes work best. Sometimes it's the contacts. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's the reading glasses. It's always good to see George and Navy Thomas exchanging some pleasantries. They will forever be near and dear to the heart right here at the Voice of College Football. '28 AD 28. Good to see you. You must be amped for this season. I don't know of a season going back 10 or 12 years that Oklahoma fans have been this confident about their team. And I get it. I believe Phil Steele picked Oklahoma to win the national championship. And by the way, next Thursday, we'll have Phil Steele right on here talking to us. So we've got a record scheduled with Phil Steele. Maybe we'll make that a live stream. I don't think he's got like 3 hours to sit around and talk college football with us, but he can come on for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll start a live stream possibly. Maybe I'll just record it. But Phil Steele next Thursday here at the Voice of College Football. Sue is a doctor. Sue, I commend you. You're obviously a very intelligent individual, for one thing. Secondly, you're doing fine work, I'm sure, in one of the needed professions one of the utmost needed professions in this world. My profession, not so much. Appreciate the super chats. I'll get to them in just a second, but I had a question coming in about Jude Sellers asking, have you ever tried to talk to the guys that do the SEC shorts, Mark? I have not, and I don't even know if I know exactly what you're talking about. I think I do. So are those the people that put together the little videos? And I should watch more of these because they're very clever and they're funny. I'm trying to think, like where they have different people represent different teams. I can't remember a scenario where I've seen this. I saw my first one just a few months ago. I don't take in a whole lot of YouTube content that is sports unless it's just watching old games. I probably watch, in terms of sports on YouTube, I watch more NFL playoff games than anything. Old NFL playoff games. Nothing within the last 15 or 20 years. Old NFL playoff games. 70s, 80s, 90s. And what I spent my time doing at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for probably 45 minutes last night was watching old footage of Jimmy Connors. He was my favorite tennis player. And it just never dawned on me to look on YouTube at Jimmy Connors' video. And something, I don't know what I was watching or what I saw, that it hit me. Oh, Jimmy Connors. I could look up Jimmy Connors on YouTube, and I just was mesmerized watching Jimmy Connors take on Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe in U.S. Open and Wimbledon semifinals and finals. That's what I did for I don't know how long. Oh, but back to the SEC shorts, guys. I think I know what you're talking about, and I think it is brilliant. And I should reach out to them. I wonder where I could find them. We had a conversation the other day with a guy that calls his channel, I believe it's College Football Home is the name of the YouTube channel, and then his Twitter account is called Campus Tour. And this guy has gone to every college football stadium. There's apparently 5 or 6 new stadiums to be opened this year, so he has to get to those. So he has been to every college football stadium, but not necessarily for a game. But he's only maybe 15 stadiums shy of going to all of them during a game, for a game. And he's worked out his schedule this year. So it doesn't seem possible, but if you really think about it, with Thursday and Friday games especially, and then with the MAC, of course, with Tuesday and Wednesday games, it is possible he's going to be able to knock out the last 15 or 16 stadiums that he needs to see this year. And he has seen and been to a game in every college football stadium. So we had a nice discussion. That video was posted a few days ago. SEC shorts. I need to mark that down, Jude. Thank you. Again, I don't know where to find them, but David, hey, Mark, what's going on with rumors from Michigan trying to spread a scandal on Ohio State? Do you know anything about it? I don't know anything about it. And as you know, I've got quite a few Ohio State contacts, but you may understand that for those people that we have on here that have actual jobs in the media where they're being compensated by an actual company, they've got to be careful with the information that they receive. For example, I was told today some somewhat insider type information concerning the Arizona State situation, but it's just for my own consumption, for my own knowledge, but it's not to be repeated. So I'm guessing that if you came across that information, whether it be online or otherwise, that I'll look into that. I was not aware of that, though. Navy Thomas, of course, excited about the Nebraska season, or knowing Navy Thomas probably not excited about Nebraska's upcoming season. The Huskers play Oklahoma, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State. 4 big ones. Then Minnesota and Iowa at the end, and also Wisconsin. The last 2 games for Nebraska this year, they better be bowl eligible before they play Wisconsin and Iowa to close out the season. Although our guy, Greg Peterson, the other night on our Nebraska Live show delivered a hot take that Nebraska is going to beat not just Wisconsin or Iowa, but they're going to beat both of them. I don't really see that. Although I do think that what is intriguing about the Big Ten Western Division is that we've got 7 teams, and Illinois is clearly not going to win the division. Purdue is a long shot to win the division, but the other 5 teams out of 7 in the Big Ten Western Division all have a legitimate shot to win the division. It would not be a surprise if any of those other teams won the division. They've all performed well recently. They've all posted strong seasons recently. Northwestern, of course, has won the division 2 of the last 3 years. Wisconsin's been consistently the best program and the best team in the division for a long time. Iowa, of course, went undefeated in 2015, and they're typically an 8-4 team. And Minnesota just went 11-2 2 years ago. Nebraska is the only one that's underachieved over and over and over and over and over, and 4 consecutive bad seasons. And so Nebraska would be the one that has to prove that they actually can play football. They've got the talent of the other 5 teams, the other 4 teams, maybe better talent if you believe the recruiting rankings. $28AD28 says that Iowa State would be the next helmet that I should get. And so does number 1 ND fan. 2 votes for Iowa State. They are not necessarily who I would consider right now. I get it. 1 big season. I'm thinking this. Well, let's see if there's any other helmet suggestions. We've got Oregon. James Yoder has been on a few times to talk Michigan. Moonbot, good to see you. Brandon, good to see you as well. USF and UCF will round out Florida. Oh, I got you. Yeah, I got Florida State, Miami. Group of 5, though, Brandon. You've got FAU and FIU. Auburn, good choice. Bill Rupp is asking or stating, Uncle Lou invite you to Slob Olympics. Yeah, I believe I got an invite this past year, but we'll have to take that into consideration. That looked like a good time. Not that I saw a couple clips of it. That would be a good time. Lou's got every mini Power 5 helmet. Number 1 ND fan, probably a college football mini helmet, if there is such a thing, with the trophy on it. Hit that like button. You're relentless, Alabama Roll Tide. You are relentless, Texas A&M and TCU. All right, here's my thought on the helmets. So what originally happened was I decided to get some helmets. So George, he would be able to let you know this, and Navy Thomas would confirm this, and NCI's Fanatic 21, and probably Cheryl, that I used to record down at the other end of the room in front of a blank wall. Just a blank wall for years. Nothing. And then I moved around to several places, and then we devised this setup here. I was about to get up and show you the whole thing. It's nothing to be impressed by or any kind of spectacle. I would love to tear this thing up and redo the entire thing. But my point was, I thought at some point, let's get some helmets to at least dress it up a little bit because I think I backed up the shot and you could see my desk. So it was just prior to the 2016 playoffs. So I said, well, let's get the playoff teams. Let's get the helmets for the playoff. Who made the playoff? Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. So that started the helmet collection. And then I think the other purchase was simply that I wanted every conference somewhat represented with the top couple teams. And at that point, it was just a couple, maybe months later. So I, of course, got Michigan and Wisconsin. I got Texas and Oklahoma, added USC, added LSU and Florida, Miami, Florida State, Notre Dame. Ole Miss and Tennessee were given to me, and I bought Kent State. Yes. All right. Got a call coming in. First caller of the night here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Is it my turn?
George, of course, it's always your turn.
Yes, it's my turn. I just want to make sure. It's like 90 degrees here. How hot is it where you're at?
Today it's more muggy than hot. I would say it's probably right this second, probably in the low 80s, but it was in the mid 80s today.
All right. It's really like in the mid 80s here. It's that mugginess is the reason I said 90. Same thing here.
It doesn't bother me. I don't mind it. I wait all year for warm weather, so I have no issue with this.
Can I ask you a question? I don't want to embarrass you in case you don't know a certain statistic, but can you tell me definitively how many times has Georgia won the national title?
I've been asked tougher questions, but I believe the answer is, let's see if I can count them all up. Let me, it's going to take a minute for me to count them all up. We're at 1, correct? Did I make it?
I don't want to be wrong on this. I don't want to guess wrong. I'm thinking it's 1.
Did they have one like way back in the fort? I don't think so. I think that was it.
I don't know.
Was the one. That was the one. That is the one. That is the one. Yes.
I'm only 61 years old. There could have been one in 1904 or something. I don't know.
They have less national championships than Minnesota.
In the last 61 years, since I've been alive, I think they won once. In my lifetime, I think it's one time.
Oh, shoot.
And yet the internet is taken up by 50% talk about Georgia. It blows my mind.
I know. You called the other night, George. This was bothering you then.
I know. Hey, listen, you do Miami talk and you do Georgia talk, but you just saw the other day, it said Miami has more blue chip talent than Florida State or Florida. You follow me? Miami's a real story. That's a good story. Georgia's sitting there with 85 5-stars and they can't beat South Carolina. I'm like, what is going on in Georgia?
They can't beat South Carolina.
You saw it. They were at home on homecoming, and they lost to South Carolina with 85 5-star players.
George,
and really,
I understand.
Like 23.
As a person who, of course, is a Florida fan, you want to troll, you want to poke the bear, you want to. I understand what you're doing here, but you understand that your statement is flawed beyond belief. They can't beat South Carolina. They played South Carolina one time and lost to them, and they beat them all the other times.
Hey, listen to me. They were ahead in the national championship game, and they let Tua Tagovailoa throw a touchdown pass and win the game. That's Georgia. That's the bottom line. End of story.
They were in the national championship game.
Herschel Walker accidentally won them a national title. Somebody told him, they didn't tell him not to run hard, you know?
Well, when they won that national championship against Notre Dame, they shouldn't have been playing a Notre Dame team that had 2 losses. They should have been playing somebody better, or maybe they wouldn't even have won that national championship.
Do you know what I think would be great? Florida beats Alabama, and Florida beats Georgia. that Georgia doesn't lose any other games, and Alabama doesn't either. And then somebody beats somebody in the SEC title game, and the national title game comes out to Ohio State, Florida, Georgia, Alabama. How about that?
When you
they're
ask
all
me,
just so god darn good.
When you asked me the question, George, to name the Georgia national championships, I should have went with my gut instinct and what was on the tip of my tongue, because of course we all know 1980. It's emblazoned in all our minds, but I was also thinking 1942. I knew that.
I knew you were going to find it. I knew you were going to find it.
I just looked it up, but even before I looked it up, when you asked me, and then as the voice of college football, I feel a bit embarrassed that I just didn't spit out what I already knew, but I thought Georgia winning a national championship in the 40s. The 40s were always won by Army and Notre Dame, and I always thought I didn't think anybody like Georgia was winning a national championship, but it was in my head 1942, 1980.
That actually just made me like Georgia a little bit more than I used to. That's admirable, isn't it? And 42, are you serious?
Also keep in mind that because it's the great sport of college football that we all know and love, everybody's running around claiming national championships. So there's 100 and some years of college football played, and there's like 1,000 national championships because, you know, there's 5 national champions for 1970 and there's 6 for 1971 and all of that. So Georgia actually, I don't know that they in particular claim all these, but various sources claim 6 national champions. 1920, 27, 42, 46, 68, and 80. Well, I, for one, know Ohio State won the 1968 national championship. They were undefeated and won the Rose Bowl. So I don't know where they're coming up with all those.
That's mind-boggling. I've been screwing with Georgia fans for years on the internet, and no one's ever told me what you just told me. Nobody even knows that. You know that, right? That's like Georgia fans don't even know how to Google that kind of shit.
Well, I'm looking at the sources that actually named them national champions in these years other than 1980. Has anyone heard of Berryman? That's who named Georgia the national champion in 1920. That's the only, like the AP.
That's another name for the
else.
No, I know who Berryman is. That's another name for the Georgia football fan club.
Berryman, Borend, and Poling in 1927.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm glad we had this chat. I've learned a lot.
In 1980, George, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 different sources naming national champions. So, of course, there's going to be a million national champions.
If you would have lived back then, they would have counted what you said. It would have been listed on that.
That would have been phenomenal. Paper. Yes, that would have been great.
And Mark Rogers said Clemson or whatever. You know.
We would have had the voice of college football national championship.
I told y'all. I told everybody we should stop it all or just go back to the bowl games. It was so fun, and we can argue about who's the national championship. But in the meantime, the real prize was Michigan won the Big Ten, and Oregon or USC won the Pac-12. And, you know, everybody got their grand prize. Now nobody gets the grand prize except one guy.
Alabama.
Whoever cheats the most effectively. Hey, listen, this is beyond free agency. There's rules to free agency now. You can just talk to any player and say, if you come here, we got somebody ready to hook you up with a Mercedes contract. This is good shit, man.
That is a good point you just made, George, because we think of free agency as just being the wild, wild west, but there's actually rules to free agency in professional sports.
Go down. You can just pick them like cherries off a tree. Hey, I got a barbecue joint that's going to give you $10,000 a month to be their representative. Come here. Check out of the college you're in and come here. You don't have to sit out a year.
We'll have players.
You can't do that. That would be discrimination.
Yes, we'll have them transferring mid-season.
There's no more sitting out shit. You follow me? Like, are you crazy? I'm not sitting out. I'm going to transfer and start. This is better than, oh my God, the NFL is done. College football is everything.
Okay, well, that remains to be
As long
seen.
as you don't walk by somebody not wearing a mask and they have to cancel your game and send you home. They better be careful, man. They better segregate. We got that variant out there now.
The day that the NFL takes a backseat to anybody, that's going to be a landmark day in this country. The NFL is so far ahead of everybody else.
Everybody can Google it. Everybody has Google. No reason, no excuse for laziness, right? You can Google it. The NFL won a Supreme Court case. Do you know what they won? Somebody was suing them for cheating. Do you know how they won the case?
When was this?
They won at the Supreme Court, the NFL. They were accused of cheating. You know how they won the case?
I don't. I'm not aware of this. Unless the way
okay,
you're describing
you can Google it.
Is...
Listen, you can Google this. This would be a subject for a show. They won the case because the NFL is incorporated as a entertainment industry. And they're unique among sports because most sports are not incorporated as an entertainment. The only other sport that's incorporated as entertainment is the WWF. You follow me?
Yeah.
So if they rig a game or a point spread, that's for your entertainment. It's entertainment. They don't claim it's sports. And listen, there's one other industry that does that in America. It's the news. The news, your local Channel 6 News, they're all incorporated as entertainment. So if you sit there and get that's where your knowledge comes from. Can you imagine? Like, it really? They're allowed to cheat, man. It's entertainment.
They're allowed to lie to us.
Nobody,
about the local news.
They call it entertainment. Hey, listen.
Yes.
I'm a legal guy. People call me when they have trouble. And I tell them this kind of shit, like it's all just like a facade. All you have to do is know like 3 or 4 words to say to them and they leave you alone. They really are honorable. The whole thing's voluntary. You have to volunteer. If you say no, they actually, to this day, you think we're living in Armageddon, but to this day, I will stick up for all of them. If you just tell them to go away and leave you alone, very matter-of-factly, maybe with a tinge of even legal shit involved, I've never once been confronted with.
George, I love your rants, except for we lose viewers and I'm losing callers as you continue to talk. Callers are dropping off the line. I have nobody on the line. I had like 3 people waiting.
I'm going to stop now, but I'm only saying that because I haven't been bothered in like 30 years. I'm trying to help. You're allowed to say no to anything.
Well, wonderful. I know who to call now if I get in trouble. All right, George.
All right. Love you, man. Bye. Good night.
Our man, George. I had 3 people lined up with phone calls. Now I've got nobody while George was on the line. Mike, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that so much. Mike has nothing to say tonight. Mike, you can talk to us at any time, but Mike still makes his presence known. And Mike gets it. He knows there's a vision here. We're working hard to build something out here, and it doesn't always look pretty at this point, but we'll get there. We will get there. We're trying to make sure that we take care of the important stuff, the content, and we'll try to make it work better and look prettier later. We'll work on that. Where's my new camera? Oh, that's right. It's upstairs. The new camera that I ordered at Christmas time. It's upstairs in my bedroom. It will be down here, and I will be working on it tomorrow. In addition to the 3 hours that I've dedicated each and every Saturday to for a project to be unveiled, hopefully in a few months. Mike, thank you for that. Appreciate Mike, the Canes fan. And of course, we serve the Miami football fan pretty well here with a couple shows each week. People sometimes complain, non-Miami fans, and say, Mark, why do you have 2 Miami shows each week? Because they get supported. That's why. Are they formally supported? No. I would like to have a sponsorship. We don't have a sponsorship, but they are supported by the viewers. They are supported by the number of views, and they are supported by the contributions. If I held all the rest of the shows to the Miami standard, I would cancel pretty much all the other shows, and we would probably go to 3 Miami shows a week. I should do that for like a month just to piss some people off. I will be posting a video. I think it's supposed to come out tomorrow or Sunday. And I think I'm going to put up a version on the Miami channel and a version on the Florida State channel. That should be quite entertaining because some knucklehead commented during yesterday's Florida State show. A person that I've never seen comment to any of the shows before. And so they decided that their first comment to me would be that I'm a phony. Call me anything, but that one is a bit ridiculous. Call me wrong, but authenticity is certainly at the top of the scale. So I had a little fun with that, and we just posted my response this weekend. I think I'll post it to the Miami channel and the Florida State channel because this particular person, India is their name, had something to say as a Florida State fan about my phoniness. They had no examples, but that was the claim. Mike, thank you again. Appreciate that. For those of you that would like to contribute to the channel, you can also do so in addition to the super chat. You can also go to Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App, search MarkRogersTV, and you bypass the YouTube filter, if you know what I mean there. Therefore, I'm not discouraging you to use the super chat. That is phenomenal, and I much appreciate it. I hope you all know that. But you can bypass YouTube if you go to Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App and just search Mark Rogers TV. The Big 12 needs their own network. Hey, I'm open. I am a free agent available to give at least part of my time to hosting a Big 12 network. So if the Big 12 needs a lead anchor, host, analyst to try to lift the spirits of the Big 12 and promote the league, we could get that done right here. As people, many people in the business, I'm talking about people that understand the business, people that work at 247 Sports and Rivals and Bleacher Report, used to tell me all the time when they found out that I worked at ESPN, they would say, what are they doing? Do they realize all the stuff that you do here? Do they realize all the content you produce by yourself? You're by yourself. You don't have a producer. You don't have any technicians. You don't have anything. You just have yourself, and you are producing more content, more college football content than they are online. Do they realize that? They could take a drop out of the ocean, clean up your set, clean up your graphics, provide you with some information, some research, and you could kill it. And I would say, something that I won't repeat here. I would say something like, yeah, you can't account for poor judgment. All right, but we are good to be where we're at right now. I am good, I am blessed, and I am happy to be doing what we are currently doing. Number one ND fan made a spreadsheet with every single college football team and plan on predicting every single college football game. Crazy? Seems reasonable. What's crazier than that? Number one ND fan is that for 2 baseball seasons, I ran a bit of an experiment that caused me to predict and wager on every Major League Baseball game. That's quite a bit more than every college football game. every Major League Baseball game for 2 years, which was, I hate to use this word, but I will, for lack of a better word, exhausting. Moonbot, thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that. Go Big Red. The Yanty is coming. Yes, their incoming running back. We'll see if he wins the job. He's definitely going to get his share of carries. Mike 3883 caught a Notre Dame game where the crowd was penalized for too much noise. Hard to imagine. Yeah, Nebraska and Notre Dame played a home and home series. When was that? That was sometime in the early 2000s. David, can never have enough college football. I can see myself staying up at 2 a.m. taking college football or just listening to a college football debate on my free time. That's the beauty of the sport. David, you have found the right place. I don't know how long you've been watching, but best discussion, debate, and analysis. That's our aim. That's our goal. That's our mission. Roster breakdowns: Georgia, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Alabama. Those are in the books. More to come. Of course, our live streams. We hope that you will join us for our team-specific live streams and bring people on board with you. So I figure if we've got 150 people, let's say, during our Miami live streams, and everybody goes out there and grabs 2 or 3 people that they know love Miami football or college football in general, then we've got 400 or 500. And then they watch for a few weeks. They like what they see, like what they hear. Then we get them to grab 3 or 4 people, and we do that a few times over and over and over. And we've got some of those YouTube shows like you see where the pace of the live chat just scrolls. It's like a blur. All right. Southern 6 roots for BYU and LSU. I think you just like the letters. Mathusi Laposo. I believe this is the first time I've seen you here. It's great to have you. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Can we get a Nebraska helmet on the shelf? We can get a Nebraska helmet on the shelf. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. I will give you my address, and you can send me a Nebraska helmet. We can do that. Oklahoma will be a powerhouse. Oh, I hate when somebody comments while I'm scrolling because then I lose track because the whole thing shifts about 100 spots. Okay. So I've lost a bunch of comments. All right. Jinker GM, I haven't seen you in a long time. Good to have you here. Boise State helmet. So Jude is letting me know that I can see SEC Shorts on YouTube. They have years of stuff making fun of college football. I think I know what you're talking about. And it is brilliant. Cincinnati helmet could be interesting. I'm not sure they will still be relevant in 2 to 3 years. Is Kent State relevant? Got them. UCLA. UCLA's got my favorite uniforms. Exactly. I'm right there with you, Kevin. UCLA has the best uniforms outside of Ohio State. I'm biased there. But other than the Buckeyes, UCLA. David, thank you so much. I always hit the like button. I love the show. We'll for sure get a shirt. And if you can do a scarlet and gray design one, that would be awesome. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. I want to know who wants what. Got a playoff starter here by Moonbot. He's looking at Nebraska, Florida, Miami, and Oklahoma. When was that? In 1990 when? Nebraska, Florida, Miami, and Oklahoma. We get a boomer from Keaton. Is Scott Frost a good recruiter? I think that most Nebraska fans would tell you, and Greg Peterson, who comes on each week with our Nebraska show from Husker Online on Rivals, I believe Greg would tell you that he's a good recruiter. I would tell you that based on the facts, based on nothing more than he's working on a 4th recruiting class right now, I'd say that he's a decent recruiter. I think he's one of the toughest jobs in the nation because they're isolated. Nebraska, Iowa, and Iowa State, those are the 3 highest level football programs in the country that are isolated, geographically isolated from football talent. Wisconsin to a certain extent, and Minnesota as well. I would think that if Nebraska was playing up to Big Ten championship standards, if they were winning 10 to 11 games per year, if they could get back to something close to what they were in the mid-90s, their roster would be comprised of probably 40 to 50% Nebraskans. But most of those players would be program players. They would be special teams players. They would be backups. And then they would have probably out of 22 starters or 30 to 35 players that play a consistent amount of meaningful minutes, that out of those 35 players, 10 or 12 of them would be from Nebraska, and the rest of them would be from Texas and California. And the guys that they get from Florida and Georgia. And they do that currently. They go to Florida and Georgia. The problem is that when Nebraska goes to Florida and Georgia, it's not like Ohio State when they go to Florida and Georgia and get some of the top 25 players in the state. Nebraska goes into the 100, 120 range. And that's not good enough. So is Scott Frost a good recruiter? He's bringing in classes that are around 20th to 25th in the nation. That's what Mike Riley was doing. That's what Bo Pelini was doing. He's doing a decent job. He's doing a capable job. The pluses to the job are that there's still some level of name brand to the school, maybe not to the student athletes that are 17 years old right now, but maybe to their parents. I can't speak to the academic status of the school. The fan base is rabid. They have resources. They have money, facilities, all of that. Many people consider them to be in the middle of nowhere. The weather's not great. They're disconnected from their base to a certain extent after leaving the Big 12. They are not a awful fit. It's not similar to West Virginia being in the Big 12. It's not that much of a stretch, but they're not a perfect fit for the Big 10 Western Division. They're an okay fit. They could have a better fit and did have a better fit geographically and in terms of culture and environment in the Big 12. So those are the pluses and minuses, and the big minus being that they are 500 miles away from players. Which reminds me of a Dwight Yoakam song. Army, Navy, Baylor, Nebraska, Iowa, and Houston, I believe, are the suggestions by Mike for helmets. George is definitely a polarizing figure. We'll say that. All right. A number one ND fan. Alabama plays all of its tricky road games this year. No way they don't slip up once. So they must be playing at Texas A&M. Yes, they are. They're playing at Texas A&M. They're playing at Florida. They're playing, I guess, at Auburn. I believe they're playing at home against LSU, I think, because they did host LSU 2 years ago when LSU won the national championship. Yeah, but we Googled that as well. And that is just, we would have to go into each individual Georgia season, 1920, 27, 42, 46, 68, those particular seasons to see how legit those national championships are. And considering the number of games that those teams played then and that they rarely played the amount of games and the quality of opponents that we would need, most of the time you're going to come to the conclusion in a 1940 or 1950 that no one team deserved the national championship. Usually you would come to the conclusion, and maybe if we get enough support, I will do this. If I get enough support, go through every year, and we'll come to the conclusion prior to especially the 70s that in a lot of those seasons, you can't definitively say that team deserved the national championship. We'd be able to say those three teams all should share the national championship, or those six teams should share the national championship because they're all 6-0 and they all played relatively the same schedule. So those national championships, again, all of those years except 1980, there are a zillion other teams claiming national championships for those years. And I know for sure that in 1968, Ohio State was undefeated, won the Rose Bowl, beat number one USC. I don't know off the top of my head what Georgia did in 68, but we'll look it up after we take this call from our man DeAndre.
What's up, Mark? You said Georgia in 68 should have won the national championship?
If you Google Georgia national championships in football, 1968 is one of the 6 years that comes up.
Wow. I know the other claim, too.
I've never heard that.
57, 80.
Okay, here we go. 1968. Here we go. 1968, DeAndre. Vince Dooley, the coach, won the SEC championship.
Right.
Finished the season undefeated, but they tied 2 games.
Right.
They went 8-0-2. Well, they should not be the national champions. They tied twice. Ohio State went 11-0, no ties. So throw that one out automatically.
Well, I thought Georgia, the school itself, only claimed 2 national championships.
Yes.
Okay.
1946.
Yeah, I don't wonder about that. I heard it.
They were the SEC champions. They went 10-0. They beat North Carolina in the Sugar Bowl. So I have no issue with that, claiming a national championship for that season.
No, yeah, I already told you, Clemson should, I think it was 42, maybe. I think Clemson should claim a national championship. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but they should. 42 and 78, but, you know, what do you think about the North Carolina players saying they disagree with expanding the college football playoffs?
Well, before I answered that, you know that I would like to go through every season. If I could get the views on the videos, I would love to go through every season and sort all of them out. But when it comes to the North Carolina, what's that?
Well, I just don't understand. I'm a history guy, so I like talking about it because I look at how sports in general has shaped our society. the importance that especially football has played in it. I mean, I'll give you an example of something I didn't know. I didn't know Pat Riley paid for Adolph Rupp, and he didn't play in that championship game versus Texas Western. I enjoy learning stuff about sports and the importance of what and I think people need to go understand why we talk about it, why we find it so interesting, and the effects that it has had on our society. And I love talking about it. I don't know why more people want to check out those videos and look at it. And I mean, I think they'll start looking at what you call a blue blood. When you claim Michigan is not you, but he would say, "Well, Michigan's a blue blood." Were they? Sure, really? Like they really not. I think people look more at Michigan as a blue blood than Ohio State, but it should be reversed. Ohio State should be the blue blood, and Michigan should be the second tier. I mean, I think people need to go look at how football is and the inconsistency and the stuff that they started building up. Just like we talked about Jim Brown and Horner. It's like, you should look at stuff like that. All right, like when we talked about the Ohio State running back, I think it was name, that won 2 national championships, that won 2 Heisman, and he didn't have more yards to the guy that was on his team. Not that many more yards to the guy that was on his team.
Yeah.
I think you should go back and look at that stuff.
You know that I bring up stuff like that all the time. And it just, I guess most people don't care. People just, not as many people as you and I care to just, a lot of people just take things for what they are. They just are handed a statistic or handed a result and they're good with it. Like in 1983 that Miami quote unquote won the national championship, but they had the same record as a few other teams. So why are they the national champion? Should they be the national champion? I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but just because somebody said back in 1983, a bunch of sports writers, that Miami won the national championship, is that valid? Is that correct? Can't that be disputed?
Right.
And just like you said, Archie Griffin, I've got all the respect in the world for Archie Griffin. I have spoken with the man twice. And when I say spoken with him, like legitimately, like for 45 minutes, talked to the guy. He's a first-class act. But I don't think most people, I guarantee 99 of even hardcore college football fans, 99% of them would never guess that he scored 4 touchdowns in his second Heisman season, and Pete Johnson in the same backfield scored 25 touchdowns. Like that shocks people when I tell people that.
Right.
When I just ask, how many touchdowns did Archie Griffin score when he won his second Heisman? And they'll say, 18, 14, no, 4. And then when I mention that Pete Johnson scored 25, well, they just assume, and you're probably aware of Pete Johnson and what he did in the NFL, that he was just a short yardage runner. So they figure, as I did before I looked up the numbers, well, Pete Johnson probably just plunged in from the 25 times. No, he had 1,100 yards rushing, and Archie Griffin had 1,400.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I just, this is story behind football, especially when you got downtime. Like why certain programs dominant and why certain not. I heard somebody, they were talking about Kansas back in when they had a little run with the coach back then. Mangino. I can't remember his name, the fat guy.
Mark Mangino.
Well, they said Mark Mangino, they explained why Kansas got really good at that time because they got a lot of the players out of Texas that nobody wanted. And the reason why Kansas can't represent that time, do it again, is because they didn't have Texas, Austin, and all these other schools that are there now. That's why Kansas just can't walk into Texas and say, hey, you can't play at Texas, but you can play at Kansas, or you can't play at those other big schools, but you come up here and play, and we'll get you there. And that's what, like Miami and Florida State. Why can't they replicate what they did in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s? Well, now you got Central Florida, you got Southern Florida, you got Florida International, Florida Atlantic. Those guys who are starting on that team probably the second or third team. And Florida State and Miami, so they don't have the depth that they used to. And that's what I'm saying. People need to look at the evolution of football. I mean, I always wonder why Penn State and Michigan are not just as good as Ohio State. I know you might tell me that they are, but if you're gonna look at them on tape, I mean, I think Clemson would do the same thing in the Big Ten as they do in the ACC, and Ohio State would do the same thing in the ACC as they do it in the Big Ten, and they records prove it. But why those programs aren't like they used to be, or Syracuse is not the program they used to be. And when we came up in the 90s and the 80s, Syracuse was top dog, but for whatever reason, they fell off. And a lot of it's because a lot of the population is moving down south. And that's the stuff that we don't take. We go study as football fans of why this is happening. I think Clemson is, an anomaly, because how is this school in the middle of nowhere doing this, but none of the schools can do it? I mean, even Alabama just got a lot of tradition. Clemson's nowhere close to Alabama's tradition. So how is this guy able to do it? And the thing is, and I tell anybody, listen, because North Carolina is down and Virginia is down, and they go get a lot of players from Virginia and North Carolina. Then they mix with the guys out of Georgia because Kirby Smart don't recruit the state of Georgia like they supposed to. And then they go get some players out of Florida. And then, hey, Dabo's old Chuck. They're like, hey. And Dabo copied Bobby Brown. And a lot of people don't follow this. When I say he copied Bobby Brown, he kept his assistants close to him and paid them more money. Because I don't know if you know this, but Mickey Andrews and what's the guy that coached at NC State? They was at Clemson when Clemson was being good in the late 70s.
Chuck Amata.
And then all of a sudden yeah. So that's my point is of our programs, and say why are these programs good? The LSU wasn't what it was. That's why I asked some of the Florida State people when I hear them talk. I say, hey man, why Florida State is not good anymore? Is it because of what happened? Is it because LSU's good now? Because it feels like Florida State used to got a lot of players out of LSU, Louisiana area. So yeah, we should look at it. We should listen to some of the stuff that you talk about the history of the channel, but people don't want to take the time to sit through there and listen to it. And it's really great history of why these programs are where they are. Why Ole Miss ain't good. I mean, they have one of the best college campuses in the world, and they're not a good football program, and they should as well because of their racist history. They didn't evolve like everybody else. And they were really good in the 50s. They probably had a better program than Louisiana, LSU did at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But the Carolina players, they won't not too excited about going to 12 teams though.
Yeah, so I just saw the headline. I didn't read the article to see why they said what they said. I just saw that North Carolina players say that they don't want a 12-team playoff. That's the only thing I saw. I didn't say if they explain why. Is it just the extra football?
No. One thing I know, I think the linebacker, I think it was Fox. He said, "Are there legitimately 12 good teams good enough to win a national championship every year?" That was his argument. I'm not trying to be funny. I don't want people to think I'm a racist type of guy, but sometimes we African Americans talk different when their counterparts are not around. And I bring this up to your attention sometimes when we're talking about football. And I ask this question to you about the money. And like my cousin Nita runs track at Pitt. Her first part of her scholarship, her first year, she only got 80%, right? So what I'm saying is that football plays for all these other sports. And like golf and tennis and stuff, women, male, whatever. So most of those people are getting free scholarships off of the back of these football players. in basketball, I think basketball is the only way that NCAA makes money. The actual corporation. The college football gets money for the bowls and the TV contract, but the NCAA doesn't see that money if I'm not mistaken. But they'd be like, a lot of that money goes to the schools and the other athletic programs. And I think what a lot of these players are saying is like, why should we go out there and play more games and physically hurt ourselves for the enjoyment and for these schools to make more money? We ain't getting none of it. And I know you're gonna go with the NIL statement, but that's coming from private businesses. That's not necessarily coming from the schools. I think that's where a lot of these people are coming from. And like, I have a cousin who's being recruited by Carolina, and that was his thought. So he was like, man, you telling me how to go play? It used to be like 2 or 3 games. Now you got to go play all these extra games, and I think that's what a lot of them feel, especially with the, what is it called, the championship games at the end of the season. So that's 13, and then you got to go play 4 more to win the national championship. I don't think a lot of them are fans of that.
I understand their point. I'm not out there getting my brains beat out, and I'm not colliding with other 250-pound players. So I understand their point. They also need to understand, though,
right,
even though this is not going to affect them, it takes a long time for this impact to take place. Let's say in 1970 that players would have said, we're not playing more than 9 games. We're only going to play 9 games. We don't want to get beat up anymore. And those players were playing both ways, many of them. So when we scoff at 9 games, we should also consider that they were playing, many of them, both ways. So anyway, let's say they said, we're not playing more than 9 games. We're getting beat up enough. And so we stayed with 9 games. And then when there was a proposed playoff, they said, we're not playing a playoff. We already play bowl games, so we're not going to play an extra game for the play. So none of this evolved to where the point where it is right now. The sport would not be as popular as it is right now for those players that are making those statements to benefit from the finances that are out there, if you follow me.
Yeah. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But, football wasn't making that much money back then. But now it's making all this money. But I agree with what you said. I see both sides of it.
Oh, I do too. I understand. I totally understand their side as well.
Yeah, so, but college football is going to have to do something about it. I mean, I think they said $13 million just for going to the Orange Bowl, but it didn't split up, did all the television money and stuff. I mean, they're making a lot of money off off of college football right now. Everybody said, well, they eat for free, they got drink, but then you got to go to position field study, you got to go to defensive team study, then you got to go lift weights, then you got your regular practice. I said, it's more than a 12-hour, 40-hour work week, and plus the game. So, I mean, I get what they're saying. And then, where does the money go? I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but a wrestler at Ohio State had won a national championship. And then the athletic director gets $9,000 because he won a wrestling championship. I'm like, what did he do for him to get $9,000 off this athlete, off of this wrestler? Why? He didn't get out there lifting weights. He wasn't out there running those hills and training. So I can't understand that myself. The athletic director get money. He wasn't even the coach. Sure. And don't get me wrong. I listen to Dabo and Urban Meyer talk about. I heard your conversation how you said Urban Meyer couldn't really enjoy the moment of winning his national championship. They put in a lot of work getting these kids to come in there and game players. You got to babysit 85 players, man. I think they deserve it. But you tell me the athletic athletic directors getting one, and the coaches are the ones that's out there doing all the hard work. Yeah, man. I kind of think I got one more question. I'm gonna let you go. So I heard I will listen to Packer and Nurm, and somebody. I guess that's their name. But they said in 2009, I know Georgia Tech beat Clemson for the ACC championship, but they said in 2009 Georgia Tech had a chance to win the national championship, but they lost to Georgia in that last game before the ACC championship game. Do you remember that?
Well, Texas and Alabama were undefeated. Those were the two teams that played in the BCS championship game. So Georgia Tech, I'm going to have to look up the exact records, but they didn't just have one loss to Georgia. Maybe they meant that going into that weekend, had Alabama or Texas lost, then Georgia would have played, or Georgia Tech would have had a loss just like those two. But I can't imagine that I know that they weren't high enough in the rankings to be considered in the BCS formula to go past Alabama or Texas, if you follow me there.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's kind of what I didn't go look it up, but I said I got to ask Mark about this because I don't remember. Because they said that year that was one of the few years that Georgia Tech had more talent than probably Georgia. But there was a running back named King. He just ran all up and down Georgia Tech's backside, and they won the game, and they would have had a chance at the national championship if they wouldn't have lost to Georgia.
So DeAndre,
I'm probably pretty sure.
Yep.
What's that?
I am just as I mentioned to you. I didn't know who they lost to, but I knew what their record was going into the Georgia game. They had a loss already. So they lost by 16. They lost by 16 points to Miami. It wasn't like they lost on a last-second field goal. Miami was decent. They were 9-4, but not great, and they lost by 16 points. So there's no way they had a good win against Virginia Tech, who was 10-3, and they beat Clemson, who was 9-5. Those were their best wins. There's no way that they would have been ranked anywhere close to Alabama and Texas. We could go back to the week-by-week rankings. I look at those all the time to see where they were ranked. I guarantee that they were no higher than 6th or 7th in the country, so I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, like you said, they beat a pretty good Virginia Tech team. They beat Carolina, who was 22nd at that time. They lost to Miami. They beat Florida State.
Okay.
And they were number 7 when they lost to Georgia.
Here we go. Yes, when they lost to Georgia, the week that Georgia, where was that? Yeah, they were number 7 with 2 weeks left in the season. Right. I don't know what they're talking about. You had Florida undefeated, Alabama undefeated, Texas undefeated, TCU undefeated, Cincinnati undefeated, Boise State undefeated, Georgia Tech had 1 loss. Okay, all those other teams lost a game too. So if they would have stayed with 1 loss, Alabama and Texas still were undefeated. And even if one of them lost a game, even if both of them lost a game, they would have stayed ahead of Georgia Tech. With their schedules, they would have stayed ahead of Georgia Tech. That's all there is to it. So I get their point, but it's quite a stretch.
Okay. Well, because they were saying that the BCS was a lot better than the playoffs because it kept everybody engaged with the playoff system. You really understand the 3 teams that you care about, that they have a chance with, just Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, and that's what they were saying. But you probably are right about that. Yeah, because I just wonder what you thought. I heard them talk about. I don't remember that. I remember that Georgia Tech team with Clemson playing in 2 classic games, and Clemson losing. I think that was first try at the ACC championship game, but yeah, I remember that Georgia Tech team. I think they had Thomas on the team, didn't they? The receiver. I can't. I remember the game. I just can't remember.
Demarius
I know
Thomas?
TJ Spiller had. Yeah. He had been on that team?
Well, 2009, yeah, he played with the Broncos when they went to the Super Bowl in 13. So, yeah, he would have been on that team.
Yeah, so I was just saying, I was just wondering if he had heard that before.
No.
And I thought it was kind of interesting. Hey, man, everybody, I think the guy that Pack was talking to was a Georgia Tech graduate that he might have played at that time, and he was bringing it up. Now, I had a cousin played at Georgia Tech, and I agree with something that he said. He said Reggie Ball and Joe Hamilton don't get the respect that they deserve at Georgia Tech's football history.
Sure.
I saw something interesting. I'm gonna let you go.
I will say that
one of the best.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say
go
that
ahead.
1990 Georgia Tech team, for as much as they get discounted for playing in the ACC and that they tied a game and they tied for the national championship or a split national championship, if you really look back at who they played, it was a pretty formidable schedule. They played well. They dominated most teams. They won by pretty wide margins. You know, they played a credible football season. You know, it wasn't a joke of a national championship. A lot of people look back at it and think it was a joke. Well, the joke was that Colorado split the national championship with them. That was the joke. Again, this needs to be reassessed. That Colorado wins an Orange Bowl on a clipping call, and that they were given a fifth down, more than anything, given a fifth down that guaranteed that they won the game. Otherwise, they would have lost the game. You know, we can debate a lot of things like pass interference calls at the end of championship games and all that, where we wouldn't have known what would have happened or whether the call was correct. But when a team actually runs 5 downs and they score in the fifth down to win the game, otherwise they would have lost the game, that's one thing we don't have to debate about. They lost that game and would have been nowhere close to a national championship shot in the Orange Bowl. They wouldn't even have played in the Orange Bowl.
Right. Yeah, I always made the argument that Clemson would have beat Georgia Tech that year. I don't know how the Bulls would have shook out, but they beat Illinois, who beat Colorado that year. And I can't remember who Colorado tied that year. Oh, man. So I said that. That wasn't Missouri. It wasn't Nebraska, Oklahoma.
Shoot.
Was it Tennessee?
Oh, that's a great call. I believe they did lose. They either lost to Tennessee. Maybe that was their loss. I think they lost.
No, they lost to Illinois because Illinois.
Oh, that's right.
Illinois came back and beat them.
So that.
Yeah, I think Tennessee might have started 0-1-1 that year.
Yeah, they were 9-1-1. Yep. 1990 Colorado. Yeah, they tied Tennessee. Okay, so they tied Tennessee. Yeah.
Right.
That was in August.
Was he Schuler on that Tennessee team?
1990, that would have been
classic.
Keith Schuler. A kickoff classic game. Tennessee was number 8 in the country, 31 all. They barely beat Stanford the next week, an unranked Stanford team, 21-17. Then they lost to Illinois, who was 21st in the country, 23-22. They barely beat Texas, 29-22. They barely beat Washington, although this is a pretty rough schedule to start. Tennessee, Stanford, Illinois was 21, Texas was 22, and Washington was 12, but they barely beat Washington. And then they won that game against Missouri that they really lost. And then, of course, I am no Notre Dame apologist, but I think that was a chintzy bad call against Rocket Ismail and Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, when Randy Kent back and they said he clipped us. Yeah. That was a hard schedule, though. They might have deserved it.
I don't know.
That was hard.
My goodness.
That's a pretty hard schedule.
Yeah, but when they legitimately lost 3 games, that's... Now, the Notre Dame game, you can't say that they would have lost for sure, but consider that game was a 9-3 game and they scored to make it 10. It's a 10-9 game, so nobody's moving the ball up and down the field. Neither team had a great passing attack, and there was only like 35 seconds left in the game. Like they would have had next to no time to do anything with that type of offense.
Right. So next time I ask you which was the most luckiest, I guess I got to include Colorado, Ohio State, and Tennessee. Next time I had to ask you a question like that, because that's pretty lucky, man. I couldn't remember that. I remember that Colorado team, and I liked them because they looked like the Steelers, because of that black and gold color. And they had the Bieniemy. And I ain't like to be enemy when he came to Cincinnati, but yeah, man. I'm saying people should go back and look at those games, man. I mean, because I hear people say 2001 Miami would have beat all these teams, but then when I hear the Florida State people talk, it's like, that team got lucky, like against Boston College. And then you look at how the offenses are different. Don't get me wrong, that Miami team had a lot of talent, but they ran for the eye, and then they played two high safeties, cover two all the time. So then you got to look at somebody with Clemson and Alabama, the amount of speed that they had. I said, man, I don't know if them guys would have really ran through these guys nowadays. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know they would have changed the offense up a little bit. But I said, man, you talking about some guys that have some, different techniques. I don't think they would have beat them. I don't think Miami would have beat some of these teams that they would have had to play today for the national championship because they were so different. Don't get me wrong, I still think that's the most talented team I ever seen, but I ain't gonna say it's the best. And I'm sure we see more better teams that play together, and you struggle against, no disrespect to Ohio State, but they didn't have a great quarterback. You struggled to keep it close with them.
Sure.
So
what was impressive about that? Absolutely, DeAndre. I was just going to say what was impressive about that Miami team from a score standpoint. I'm looking at the schedule right now, and now some of these games are coming back to memory, is that they didn't play a great schedule, but it was a pretty tough schedule, and they really took it to Florida State. The Florida State team wasn't great, but they beat them by 22 points. And you mentioned the Boston College game. What happened there, for everybody listening, was that Miami led, I think the score was 11-7, and Boston College was at the Miami 5 or 6 yard line late in the game, ready to take the lead. And Ed Reed made a pick six that closed out the game 18-7. But the next 2 weeks, they played Syracuse, who was number 14 in the country. They beat them 59-0. And then they played number 12, Washington, and they beat them 65-7.
Wow. That is amazing. Hey, you know what? Funny though, you bring up Boston College. For their lack of football program history, can you imagine how many big games they have won at Chestnut Hill or just beating teams?
Yeah.
Like if we go back to the 80s, they beat Clemson coming off the national championship game with Doug Flutie. They beat Miami back in the day with Doug Flutie. They beat Southern Cal about maybe 7 years ago. I even say, well, Southern Cal wasn't that talented. They beat Southern Cal. I mean, they got more talent than Boston College. I mean, they beat Notre Dame after Notre Dame beat Florida State. That program, I know it's not a great program. I think that coach out there is doing a really good job. But Boston College has won some amazing games. That's why I say some of these guys need to go back and listen to some of those national championship things that you want to talk about, because I think they really would enjoy it, and they would just sit down there and say, wow, I didn't know that happened. Like, oh, man, maybe Miami should have won the national championship in 1983, or, like I bring up Clemson and Florida State in 1989. I just Florida State finished in front of Clemson, and Clemson beat them at Florida State by by like what 17 points, or how good was Clemson in I forgot the year. The year that Clemson was number 3 and Florida State was 10. Florida State needed special team points to beat Clemson. They needed a return by Deion Sanders, and then that fake fumble Ruski by Butler to even come close to beating Clemson. If you take those 2 touchdowns away, all because of special teams, Clemson beats Florida State 21-7. But like I said, I know you talk about it's all about national championships, and you're right. That's what all people remember. National championships are finishing the top 5. But all right, Mark, man, you have a great night. I've been listening to the show.
DeAndre, do this for me. You throw me a year, and I will do a video on it this weekend.
All right.
Give me any year you want.
All right. I got you. That's how to think about it. I hit you on Twitter.
All right. That sounds good. All right, DeAndre. Appreciate it, man. Have a good night.
All right. You too.
All right. Appreciate people being patient. Next call coming in here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, what's going on, Mark? I haven't called in a while. This is LV Live. I hope all is well with you, sir.
Doing well. Appreciate you calling tonight. What's going on?
Everything's going good, man. Just looking forward to August, Hell Week, and football gonna be back in full swing. So before I even get started, I just kind of had to correct the last caller, man. He's pretty good caller. A lot of good statements, a lot of good things he's touched on. But that 01 Miami team, man, they didn't just have good players; they had Hall of Famers and Pro Bowlers. I mean,
absolutely.
Most teams today, even today,
yes,
they're not producing what that Miami 01 team did. I mean, those guys showed that what they did in college, they can do in the pros and Hall of Famers as well. I mean, that 01 team is
probably the most talented team in history. Yes, and I think he knows that. I think he was just making the point that because of how offensive football has changed, if you just took that team, if you could just take it out of 2001 and plop it on a field in 2020 against Alabama, and that's really not fair to them because they wouldn't have time to prepare.
Right, but I honestly think they can adjust, man. I mean, you got to think of who they had. I mean, and the weapons that they had, the guys that, you know what I mean? Football is, it changes with time. It changes with the players. So, remember, a lot of these college kids have to adjust to the pros.
And just another
that's
quick
another
point
thing also.
And just another quick point along the same lines, we can take those arguments all over the place and we can go back generations and say a team from the 1950s has no way of competing with the team today. But at the same time, you've got to understand that they would have no chance because they didn't grow up with the nutrition and the weights.
Of course.
And they didn't put in the time and they weren't given all the perks and the luxuries. Those guys played both ways.
Absolutely.
You just
that's insane. Yeah, they wouldn't have been able to handle it. It would just been too much.
No wonder they didn't celebrate after they scored a touchdown. They had to go line up for the kickoff, and then the point after, then the kickoff, and then had to go play defense. So they didn't have extra energy. They didn't get pulled after they ran a 40-yard fly pattern. And then the other, I'll just make one other point along those lines that really hit home that I've remembered it for all this time was I was watching a documentary on the 1958 NFL championship game, which was historic because it really captured the television audience and really vaulted the NFL into prominence and helped it past baseball over the next decade or two. And it was between the Giants and the Colts. And a couple of these guys were asked during interviews, 1958 NFL championship game, they were asked how they celebrated and what it was like after the game. They said, well, we had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning the next morning and go to our factory jobs. The season was over, so we had to start our factory jobs that Monday morning.
Wow.
So, it's just a different world.
It's just the times.
Yeah, so they didn't have the ability to prepare and do all these things and that they do today. So
the nutrition and stuff. And then also too, you mentioned he was asking about, how did Clemson get good so fast, A big part of them a big part of them, believe it or not, was that year also too when Taj Boyd was there, and they had that really good team.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get as far, but they were really solid. They were really, really good team. They were on the cusp.
Yep.
And then during that time, if you remember, Mark, it was like down years in California for SC, UCLA. It's kind of been down years for Texas.
Sure.
It's been down years for Florida, Miami, and Florida State. So they took full advantage, just like Ohio State has, of going in there and plucking all those top players and saying, hey, look what we're doing. Right? Listen, your team is not doing too well. They may not make it. We can make it. So then they get this Deshaun Watson. Then they get Trevor Lawrence. So that's all it takes. Once kids kind of start seeing that their home team or the team that they want is not going, and a couple of their buddies are saying, hey, listen, man, we're going to Clemson. Come check it out. Or another buddy says, we're going to Ohio State. Because that's how Ohio State has also pretty much been legit for these last couple of years and how they whoop it up on Michigan. They're going down to Florida and California and getting all the speed. And so Michigan just can't keep up. And I think that's why Clemson is where it's at today, because you got to think, DJ's a California kid. He always wanted to go to SC, right? But he realized that the program ain't where it's at because of Clay Helton. So he said, man, I'm going to go out to Clemson to where I see what they're doing with their quarterbacks, because I want to go to the NFL. So a lot of kids from Florida, because they remember what Urban Meyer did. What are they doing? They're going up to Ohio State because they're saying, hey, look, man, they're winning. They're going on television. Miami's not doing that. Florida State's not doing that anymore. So that's a big reason why those teams have been able to really, really kind of last 5 or 10 years, because those programs have been so down. And also, too, they're going to Texas, which is big recruiting site, and just stealing all those kids. And a lot of those kids aren't going to Texas. And so I think that's why, that's pretty much has happened with the whole like surge with Clemson and Ohio State. Alabama's going to be Alabama because they're an SEC country, of course. But I think that's been the big surge for those two programs, because remember, Clemson has never really, they've been a solid team, but not a powerhouse. But once, a lot of those other, perennial powers, or blue bloods, I like to call them, have been kind of like on the down. They've been able to go in there and just pluck talent. And, once you get a kid on campus, man, you still got to start showing them around, and they start seeing those national championships and stuff like that. And they say, hey, man, look, I can come in and start and make it to the NFL, then I'm going to do that, because that's the goal for most of these kids. And so that was my viewpoint on that. Also, too, I really wanted to touch on the playoff, right, Mark? Because I just feel like, can you hear me?
I'm with you.
Hello? Oh, sorry. No. I think the playoff is a good thing. With these 12 teams, to me, people are saying that they're going to see that, it's going to probably impact the bowls. It's going to impact, rivalries. I don't think at all it will. I think what it'll do is they'll pretty much make those rivalries even tougher, or make those games even tougher, to where people understand that, listen, we have to schedule certain teams because we want to be one of those 12. It's just like the NFL playoffs. They said, it's going to have an impact with the kids. They're saying that with making the NFL season much longer too. It's going to impact the players. So this is pretty much where it's going. As you know, and everyone else knows, it's all about the dollar. So, hence with the NIL and what they're allowing the kids to do. But it's going to give a lot of those teams, to me, opportunities to play against the big boys. Like, I love the fact a few years back when we saw Boise State on the rise and they knocked off Oklahoma. That was a big deal when that happened. Huge. And that made it like a great feeling, like a Cinderella story for a small school to come up and beat a powerhouse like Oklahoma. That's needed again somewhat to me in college football, because it's the same deal. Alabama's just cranking them out, right? So how would it make college football great if you saw a team like, UCF come in and beat Alabama, or a few years back when Alex Smith was quarterback and they beat Alabama that one year. So to me, that's what makes it great, because you give those teams an opportunity. All it takes is one game. It's kind of like the NCAA, Field of 64. All it takes is one game. You beat that team one game, you're better than them that one night. Hence, like we talked about that 2001 Miami team. Ohio State needed one night to just be better than them. And to me, that's what makes football and sports, because you're given the opportunity to kind of see how good are you really, right? And then also too, I think it'll open up recruiting better too, because then a lot of kids may feel like, hey, listen, I don't have to go to Alabama or LSU to get recognized. You know, I can go to maybe a school like Virginia Tech, or maybe a school like Syracuse, or, you know, maybe even a Wisconsin, right? And I'm a 5-star. I can go there because there's a potential that they could be in the playoff. They was in the playoff last year. So I just want to get exposure because I want to go to the NFL. I think that opens up the floodgates even more for recruiting. I don't think we'll see it, of course, the first couple of years of it, you know, because kids are still going to want to go to Alabama and LSU. That's always going to be because of just the name sells itself, you know, like USC sells itself, Michigan, Ohio State sell itself. But I think you'll see a lot more of those 5-star kids really lean into possibly going someplace else where they know they can come in and start and play right away, and their team can make it to the playoffs because there's more teams in the playoffs, 12 teams. So that opens up the possibility of that, and then it might pretty much balance out the recruiting thing. Like I said, you know, give it a couple of years to where a lot of kids now are not just picking the same old schools anymore. Because there's one kid saying, listen, I'm a 5-star, I'm a quarterback, I don't have to go to Florida or maybe Clemson and sit behind a guy. You know, I can go to maybe like a Georgia Tech or something like that, or maybe go to a Washington and start right away because there's a potential we can make it into the playoffs and I can get my numbers up and, of course, get straight to the NFL. I just think it's great, man. I mean, I know a lot of people worried about them getting injured and stuff like that. That's the case even if you were playing a regular season and you had a bowl. I mean, you know, you have to worry about injury. That's just football by itself. But I think it's great. I think it's great. I want to hear your viewpoint on it, Mark.
So I'm on record many times of saying that the playoffs should be expanded. I've said that for years. Shoot, when I was early in high school, I wrote a paper in 1984 saying that there should be a 16-team playoff. So I don't know that anybody was talking about it much before I was, but of course nobody heard that.
So
but,
Mark, so Mark,
yes.
So Mark, you think it should be 16 teams?
Well, I don't necessarily. If we were playing video games and the players didn't have to get beat up, yeah. If you took the human aspect of it, I would like to see 16 teams. This is what I don't like about the 12 teams. So I outlined this in a number of videos, but I outlined a number of reasons why the 12 teams won't work. But the primary reason is buys don't work in college football. Do you want to know why? Okay. So do you like the NFL?
Yes.
Okay. If you know anything about the NFL, of course, there are buys in the NFL. And I'm not crazy about buys, period, but I understand them in certain aspects. In the NFL, the reason buys are valid is because if Team A, the Pittsburgh Steelers, go 14-2 and win their division, and the Kansas City Chiefs, Team B, go 11-5 and win their division, well, the Pittsburgh Steelers clearly showed that they earned that bye, that they had a 3-game better record under almost exact circumstances because those two teams play in the same conference. They play 10, 11, 12 games that are exactly the same as the other team, and the other 3, 4, 5 games are so similar in opponents that bye was earned by that particular team over the other team. We can't say that in college football. I challenge anybody to go through year to year through the playoffs or through the regular season, go through the college football standings each season and lay it out as it would be and try to determine, because up until this 12-team format came out, most people were talking about a 6-team playoff where there would be 2 buys. And I am telling you that to determine which 2 teams or which 4 teams should receive buys is impossible to be fair. It is impossible to be fair about that because they just don't play each other, and they don't play even teams that played each other. There's no connection between these teams to be able to make a fair judgment over who should make the playoff or who should receive the buys.
You know, Mark, Right. Well, Mark, the way that they would do that, Mark, is strength of schedule. That's why I was saying earlier, you're going to kind of be forced to schedule.
It doesn't work.
Say that one more time.
It doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, and so this is the other issue I have with it. Not only is it not fair and it doesn't work, once you implement it, the advantage given to the team that has the bye is so astronomical. So think of it this way. Let's say it is Selection Sunday after the conference championship games, and the 12-team field is unveiled with the 4 teams that won conferences that receive the byes. Okay, there is going to definitely be a situation, it's going to happen almost every year, in which the 4 seed, let's say, is 12-1, and the 5 seed's 12-1, and the playoff committee just had to make a decision that one of them had a better record, had a better, not record, but as you mentioned, better strength of schedule, better wins, not as bad of a loss, whatever it is. They'll make their determination. Right. Okay, this is what makes this completely unfair, is that we're just going to fill in team names just to make it more easy for everybody to follow along. Let's say the 4 seed is Oklahoma and the 5 seed is Oregon, and they both went 12-1, and Oklahoma won the Big 12 and Oregon won the Pac-12. So Oregon's going to, as the 5 seed, going to have to play a first-round playoff game against the 12 seed, and let's say that's, Auburn. Auburn's 9-3 from the SEC. So Oklahoma or Oregon has to go play Auburn, and Oklahoma gets to sit for 3 weeks and wait for that playoff game while Oregon prepares for Auburn. Okay. Consider that, number one, the ultimate advantage of a bye is that you can't lose. So obviously, the most obvious advantage is you can't lose versus a 50-50 proposition for the other 2 teams that have to play. Point number 2 is that you get nicked up playing. The team that wins that game is going to have to focus and have to make it through a very difficult team, a quality team, and survive that game. And they're going to get nicked up. No question about it.
Of course.
Okay, point number 3 is that they're not only going to get nicked up, but there is a fairly high possibility that somebody prominent is going to get hurt in that game and miss the next game. If not 2 players, if not 3 players, probably somewhere in the 1 to 2 player range. Somebody's going to get hurt. And because you're
playing high-level football against high-level competition.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay, point number 4, and I think this is the one that gets disregarded that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, is that let's say the first round game's 2 weeks away. So the second round game is going to be 3 weeks away. So for 2 weeks, Oklahoma or whoever I set up, Oregon and Auburn are going to have to prepare for each other. They don't have the luxury to say, you know what, Auburn's not that good. We're not going to prepare for them. We're going to prepare for Oklahoma. No, they're going to have to be laser focused in terms of practice, game preparation, film preparation, all of it. The coaching staff, all effort goes toward beating Auburn or beating Oregon. They don't have the luxury of preparing for the next game. Oklahoma, on the other hand, is going to be able to sit for 3 weeks and do nothing but study and prepare for Auburn and Oregon for 3 weeks.
Right.
And then in addition to that, they're going to have the advantage of actually watching the 2 teams play and have that on film right before their game.
Right, Mark, I agree with you. But Mark, that's how the playoffs go. That's even in the NFL.
But
you gotta.
But in the NFL, the bye is determined in a fair way. It is earned. It is not earned in college football. Right. I'm telling you that if you would go through each season and try to determine who receives the byes, you're not going to be able to fairly distinguish it. I guarantee it.
Right. So my thing is that in order to possibly do it, right, this is not a definite, Mark. So to possibly do it, that's where, to me, a lot of those teams, you see, perfect example, you see some of these teams playing Coastal Carolina. They're not going to be able to do that anymore because of what you just stated. So if Oregon doesn't want to play and doesn't want to get caught up in that, they're not going to play Coastal Carolina. They're going to play maybe Wisconsin at Wisconsin. right? And then another game that they may have, they may schedule Texas home, right, to pretty much strengthen their schedule because they know later in the year they have USC. So then Oklahoma is going to say, okay, we're not going to play Tulsa. We're going to go to Florida State. So it's going to force. That's what I've said. It's going to force teams to play those games and not have any cupcakes. They're going to be forced to. And so that's why I was saying my strength schedule, because it's going to say to yourself, like to your point, Mark, you're absolutely right. You're going to say, we can't afford for them to look at our schedule and say, you didn't play anybody, so you're 12-1, so yeah, we're going to give Oklahoma the nod. Because look who they played. They went down to Florida and lost, but then they went down to LSU, or LSU came to Norman and they smoked them. So we're going to give them a nod. So to me, that's what's going to help. It's going to make those teams play top-tier people. It's going to force Alabama to go up to Columbus and play. Remember, USC did that a couple of years back, and, that was a great game when it was a home and home. And, that's when they had, God Bless the Dead. They had Joe McKnight and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is it's going to force those teams to play those games during the season. Rivalries are going to be huge because Auburn has a chance to maybe knock Alabama down from the playoffs. Then also, too, you have to think of this as well as Mark. A lot of teams are going to be vying to get into the super conferences. Some teams are going to be vying to try to get into the ACC. Is Notre Dame going to be an independent? I don't think so. Because they're going to say, all right, look, do we either join the Big Ten or do we go to the ACC? Then also, too, you're going to have a lot of teams that are going to say to themselves, all right, look, man, we got to do something because we're getting close to it, but we continue to kind of be knocked down based on our conference and based on who we're playing. So we're going to have to do that. The SEC is always going to be the SEC. So if you win that, most of the time you're going to be like a top seed because they already know that's the gauntlet by itself. That's like going through the Texas high school playoff system, the way they got that set up down there, going through the SEC. So I do agree with you. I just disagree on the part that they're going to be able to pretty much make the determination because of who you play. That's why it's going to be no more cupcakes. Some teams may try to, right, Mark? And then they're going to realize, like, okay, you know what? We can't schedule any more cupcakes, man, because this is knocking us down in the rankings to where instead of us being a 2 seed in a playoff, now we're a 6 seed because of who we played. So now we got to play, like you said, and now we got to wait like another week. So this other team's been sitting around for 2 weeks. And we could have easily been that, but we chose to schedule Coastal Carolina or South Carolina State.
We got your point. So, LVI, your point would be more valid about the scheduling and the incentive and the motivation to schedule tougher non-conference opponents if there was an objective system, but there's not an objective system. So because there's not an objective system and people are selecting the rankings, so we're basically doing the same thing. We're just extending these college football playoff rankings to 12. And the one thing that I can't agree with what they're doing with the 12 teams, if they must go with 12 teams and have these buys, is that they are awarding the conference champions the first 4 slots. I do agree with that. And I won't go off on that. The point that I'm making here is about the scheduling. The best way to approach that would be to take the scheduling out of the team's hands. Take the scheduling out of the programs and the institution's hands and schedule college football for college football.
Okay, I like that. I like that.
So I've already done this. I've already cut videos and thrown them out there to show how college football should be scheduled. Number one, it's screwed up in conference. In-conference scheduling is screwed up. And here's the best example I've got for you. In 2012 or 13, when Alabama and LSU were the best teams in the SEC, and it really doesn't even matter that they were the best teams in the SEC, but it just spotlights it even more. As you well know, they play each other in the same division. They also play all the other teams in the division. So 6 of their 8 conference games are exactly the same. LSU and Alabama. They play each other. They play the other 5 teams in the division. Okay, what's different are the 2 teams that they play in the other division. Well, in this particular year, LSU played Georgia and Florida, who both went 7-1 in the SEC the previous season. Okay. Alabama played Kentucky and Tennessee, who went a combined 1-15 in the SEC the year before. So how is that fair when one team, they both play 6 of the same 8 teams, but the two differentiating games, one team has to play 2 teams that went 14-2, and one team has to play 2 teams that went 1-15, and they're competing for the same division? That's not fair. That would, again, I'm not going to go through my whole system, but it's out there. It's on video. That would take care of that. So everybody in every conference would play a 500 record. So everybody, if you added up everybody's schedule in conference, they would play a 500 composite schedule from the season before. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the out-of-conference games, I would take the same approach. Everybody would play a composite 500 schedule. So the 4 teams that everybody played non-conference would add up to a 500 schedule from the season before. So you wouldn't have teams that have these loaded schedules. Like, oh my goodness, USC before the pandemic last year was supposed to be playing Alabama, Notre Dame, and somebody else tough from the group of 5, like Fresno State or somebody, I forget.
Right.
And then Baylor. Baylor has not played a non-conference game against a ranked opponent since 1997. 24 years since Baylor played. You just can't have that. You can't compare teams when one team plays a lousy schedule and other teams load up with really good schedules. We would do away with that because it would be a formula schedule given to each team.
Right. So your thing, so your thing is pretty much take the power out of the school's hands.
Yeah. Why can't we schedule in all this ridiculous rhetoric about we need to schedule games 12 years in advance? The Major League Baseball schedule is 10 times more complicated than a college football schedule. They schedule it during the off season. These schedules can be made during the off season. And then what also would be a great promotional tool for college football is, you as an NFL fan know that when the NFL schedule is released, this has to be the most overrated, hyped event in sports. When the NFL schedule is released, I could tell you practically 12 or 13 games out of every 16 for every team without even looking at the schedule. And they hype it in their studio shows all day on the NFL Network and ESPN. I would have a college football. I would have a college football schedule release. Every May 1st would be our college football schedule release, and it would be like a national holiday. It would be huge.
You got that right, Mark, because listen, for all us football guys, that's what we love. We look forward to it because during this time we're struggling. We can't wait till August. So, of course, it's overhyped. We want it overhyped, and to your point, if May comes in, Mark, and me and you can do a show. I have my show, LV Live. Please, guys, check on my site. Don't mean to do that to you, Mark, through a plug, but
absolutely,
me and Mark could do a show because I totally agree. It would be super hyped because people look forward to football. Listen, football is king. We all know this. I love basketball as well, baseball, I love boxing, but football is king. I mean, I played in high school and college, so there's a different type of aura when it gets to fall, right? It is, and that's just what it's about. So, yeah, people get overhyped about that. But to your point, if they would have put that out, I mean, it was because I've always felt in my heart of heart that college football was always bigger than the pros. Just because there's no money involved, the fans are just on an all-time high, and this is from people who live in Alabama, have nothing to do. You go out there on a Saturday night, you think the president is here. You know what I mean? So there's nothing like it. So you have something like that. Oh man, it's gonna send the college football world in a frenzy because that's what they want to see because they want to see their hometown team who they play, right? So, all right, buddy, Mark, listen, let me get going. Listen, your show was amazing, man. As always, your insight is the best, man. So I'm glad I can come by and give you a call and check it out. And yeah, man, I definitely would love us to do something. I'll definitely hit you up on Twitter and I'll take it from there. All right, Mark?
Give me a call anytime. Thanks, man.
All right, you take care. Bye, man. Bye.
All right. Appreciate everybody hanging on the line. David's on the line. How we doing tonight, David?
Hi, and how are you, Mark? By the way, the shirts are looking very good. By the way, my compliment.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Very spiffy. I will.
Thanks to
be
David
looking
Knight.
to purchase one of those. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks, David. Good job. I wanted to give you a call, Mark. I find myself watching the Steve Dace Michigan podcast more and more these days. And
Sure.
I guess that's an
he's
unfortunate
great.
thing being in Ohio State. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm taking it some of his viewership is Ohio State fans just enjoying his misery, though. You know, right?
Oh, I'm sure of it.
I wanted to give you a call because you were on there the other day, and you and Steve were pretty much breaking down the NIL. And I kind of wanted to go over, kind of dissect your conversation a little bit, go over some of the things you guys had talked about. Basically, what you had talked about, and Steve, I got the impression from Steve that he sees. Did you get the impression that he sees the NIL, if not as a bit of an equalizer? Did you get that impression from him?
Yes, because his main point to me that resonated with me is just the incentive of athletes to go to another program to be able to get on the field to play so that they could be marketable.
Right. Okay. I mean, first of all, I want to go over kind of a few things that he had stated, and I want to go over something you had mentioned. I'm still kind of taking a wait and see approach with this NIL. I don't know what it's going to lead to long term. I know in the past I'd mentioned to you the slippery slope theory. A lot of people don't believe in it, but there's often times, and I mentioned this in the chat, I don't know if you thought 10 years ago when watching college football we were going to have something like the NIL 10 years later. I wasn't, unfortunately, talking to you in 2011, but I mean, did you even envision something like this years ago, or did you think that this was, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
When it first struck me was when Johnny Manziel got in trouble just prior to the 2013 season after winning the Heisman Trophy, and he had that incident in Florida in which the NCAA completely botched that situation, or at least the appearance of that situation, because they ended up communicating to all of us that there was no evidence that he did anything wrong, but they still suspended him for the first game of the 2013 season. And that's when he first started the money signs and all of that. And I actually had a young lady on here who had, she was on ESPN at the time. Oh my word, I can't remember her name. Elika. I can't remember her last name. Anyway, she was on a couple times, and I brought her on here, and we discussed it, and we had a really good discussion. And that was the first time that I even processed it to be able to communicate that I was all for athletes benefiting, profiting from name, image, and likeness, or whatever I stated it at the time, celebrity, that whatever they could. And I wasn't even thinking social media at that time, even though social media was a thing. It wasn't as just ingrained in our everyday life as it is now. I was thinking more so from the standpoint that the Mississippi State football players could run down to Joe's Chevy dealer and sign autographs for a couple hours and get $5 a pop. That's how I envisioned it at the time. And so that was 8 or 9 years ago.
Right. I think that was right around that 2013 time frame. That's right. I mean, the one thing that I was going to say, though, Mark, is I just think that when you look at this thing, I mean, I don't know, as I've mentioned to you in the past, if this is going to lead to paying the players. I'm not a fan of paying the players. One thing that you had mentioned on the Dace podcast that I think is absolutely correct. I think that there's a lot of undervaluing of what the scholarship means. I mean, that's not just something that's, that's pittance. It's, worth a lot of money. I think that a lot of people, and there's a lot of folks that are out there that seem to take this approach that, well, they don't want to say it, although some do come out and say it, that the college athletes are using the college so that they can build themselves up, get the coaching that they need to get to the NFL. And that's going to lead me to another point that I was going to make about the NIL in a minute. But obviously, if you ask top high school athletes what are their main goals when choosing a college, or, they would say, a lot of them say, to get developed to go to the NFL. But if that's not the number one reason, it's in the top three, right, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that being said, the one thing that I always say, and, obviously I always think one of the great things I liked about Woody Hayes was, and I don't know if you've seen any documentaries on him, but he was a great advocate for education. He was. Did you ever hear the line that Archie Griffith said when he recruited him?
Give it to me. It may spark my memory.
He said in recruiting him, he said, we had a conversation and we didn't talk about football once. All he talked about was education.
Mm.
And, I think that, when you take a look at where college football is at, I don't know, did you ever see the ESPN 30 for 30 broke?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, the bottom line is the average NFL career only lasts 2.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if this is being conveyed enough to the student athletes. By the coaches, by the assistant coaches, or if these guys, because they're young, just think that, hey, that's not going to be me. I'm going to go on to this 9-year, 10-year NFL career, and it's going to be awesome. Kind of the naivete of youth, right, Mark?
You bring up some great points, David, because the very nature of the athlete at that level is that they have a great deal of confidence. Well, that serves them well.
That's absolutely.
That serves them well in most cases, but when it comes to being realistic about their future, it does not serve them well because most of them are wrong. Right. I don't know even what the math would look like if you took every Alabama roster over since Nick Saban took the reins. So even go to the very highest standard of college football, every Alabama roster, took down every player, and then how many of them earned a paycheck in the NFL? I don't know what that percentage would be, but it wouldn't be nearly as high as people would think it would be.
Right. Well, and the other point that I would make, and this kind of goes back to the Dave's conversation that you had on his podcast, is that he sees it, as I mentioned at the top, as more of an equalizer. He was talking about the fact that, Ohio State's 3 top recruits, them having 3 of the top 50 recruits in the quarterback room. Mm-hmm. He had mentioned that. And he had mentioned how he sees that changing with the NIL. And I would not be so sure about that, just for the simple fact about the original point that I had just made about one of the top goals, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 goals of every student athlete, or of all these high school athletes, 4- and 5-star athletes, being to go to a college that is going to get them best prepared to go to the NFL. And these high school athletes know that they're going to an Alabama or an Ohio State where they're going to have to compete for the position. And I've seen a lot of them interviewed, Mark, and a lot of them, take great pride in that competition. Maybe you've seen some of these interviews with these athletes as well. They feel that they can compete and win that starting position. So I don't think it's just a foregone conclusion that it is going to be this great equalizer. Now, I know Dave had mentioned the point about the state of Iowa and, where they're at with agriculture and in the insurance industry and things of that nature. But, and maybe long term, maybe the state of Iowa or, kind of the mid-level programs in college football like in Iowa will have this, emerging, company that is doing, great things in the NIL department for the athletes that go to their college. And they're doing extremely well. I mean, I think it's going to take a few years before we see something like that come to fruition. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, if it does come to fruition. So I didn't want to argue his point. I don't know that I did to a certain extent. If you remember, my approach right off the top was basically saying, I don't pretend to know what's going to happen, because it seems like from the time that this struck, every time I do a show like this and somebody called in and would say, well, this is what's going to happen, or that's going to happen, it wasn't difficult for me to have a counterpoint. And it's not because the person was a moron. It was because there's a number of ways to look at this. And I even would state, this is what I'm guessing will happen, but I certainly could see the actual inverse of that happening. I don't know. Does location matter? Does it not matter because things are so social media driven? LA and Miami, as I mentioned, were the first two locations that I thought of as being an advantage, but will they truly be an advantage? Because there are outlets and money. This is not 1955 where there's like 8 major American cities and that's where all the money is. There's money, there's business everywhere. And maybe since you have less competition in a non-pro sports market, maybe that is of a greater advantage. I'm going to name a couple markets that do have professional sports teams, but they're not saturated with professional sports. Columbus, Ohio, and Memphis, Tennessee. They're large American markets in the top 25 or 30, but they're not so huge that they're just saturated with professional sports. I don't know what the answer is. I'm just raising possibilities.
Right. Well, your points about like Miami and the Los Angeles area are dead on, because I think there are, particularly in those areas, a little bit more consumed with pro sports. I mean, and it's not to say that, maybe, Miami and USC have obviously had their runs of greatness to where, those areas were consumed with those football teams. I mean, obviously, Miami in their heyday had a number of sellouts at the Orange Bowl. We all know what USC looked like, during the Carroll era. And, even you go way back, you go back to the 60s and even back further on to when they were just a top, 2 or 3 program in the country. So I still not of those 2 programs, by the way, Mark, I never heard your opinion. Is it far more likely that USC attains greatness before Miami attains greatness if you had to bet on the 2?
Aside from this NIL situation, just talking what's going on at each school and what's probable?
Yeah, if you're just making a general bet on which program is more likely to get to the playoff and maybe contend for a national championship first. Just bottom line.
I would say USC, but I don't know that I can exactly put my finger or validate why I think USC.
Yeah, I think it's USC. I think that conference is really doable. I think they obviously still have a really, great recruiting base there. And I just think Clay Helton's a mediocre coach at best. I think if they had the right person there, I still think that they could be, especially in that conference, I think would be a playoff team. But, I think that's just a matter of having the right person there, just in my opinion, in comparing the 2. But yeah, I'm with you, Mark. I think we're in agreement on this. I'm taking a wait and see approach with this thing as far as the NIL goes. But it's going to be an interesting, thing once we come back to this conversation 4 or 5 years from now and see where things are at.
And again, not to restate it, but we certainly are in one lane of thought when it comes to a scholarship that it just seems to get just completely disregarded by, I'm not saying the athletes themselves, because I haven't heard them comment it, but just on with fans, just it's a scholarship. They're not getting paid. They should get paid. You just get a scholarship. Oh my word.
Right.
Scholarships are worth
over
$100,000.
I've always been for increasing the stipend. I mean, if people are out there saying that I heard one of your callers saying, well, these players don't have enough money for food or for clothing, which you're going to have to statistically show me how many college football athletes, Division I athletes, are out there starving and don't have clothes. I mean, I'd like to see a breakdown on that before we just start saying that.
David,
but
we are generally.
Point,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
No. But to that point, if we need to increase the stipend bottom line so that they can have enough money to afford food and clothing, then let's do that. So I don't think we needed an NIL to get kids food and clothing. That's what I was going to say.
I am in favor of NIL for all the reasons that I've stated elsewhere, but it does hurt me, if that's the right term. That's maybe a little overstated, but it does hurt the purity of the game, along with a lot of other things that have happened that I'm against. I'm against in terms of not wanting to see the purity, the sanctity of the game and the sport decline. But that's what's happened. And it's already happened, and we're not going to reverse time and go back.
Sure.
As I believe you've probably heard me state before, I thought it was brilliantly stated and communicated by Jim Delaney on 2 occasions that I was in the room, where he depicted what it looks like for a student athlete in 1968 when he was playing varsity basketball at North Carolina, going to Final Fours, and what was placed on him, both from the standpoint of the burden and the responsibility and the load placed on him versus the benefits. So neither one was as great. We're treating these student athletes, these kids, as professionals, which is to their benefit that they're being treated like kings, but it's also a burden. It's a pressure. It's a responsibility. It's a job that wasn't near the burden or responsibility that it was 40 years ago. So it's to their credit that they're able to deal with it, but also that they're treated, and they play in these palaces now, and they go to practice in these palaces, and they, these facilities have become just ridiculous. None of that's necessary.
Sure. Well, I mean, I posted this in the chat a couple times, Mark. I mean, bottom line, years ago, I used to say the line between college football and the NFL was blurred. It's no longer blurred, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
There is no line.
Yeah.
So,
and just one more point to extend upon a point I believe you were making about you would like to see some statistics. That's an issue I have with a lot of topics that we deal with in this country now, is that we are more moved by videotape. Like, so if we see one incident and it looks horrible, then we think that that's happening a million times, when the statistics tell us, okay, this may be not necessarily the case.
Right.
The best team in the NFL last year turned out to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, I could go through their game tape over the course of 19 games, and if I said, here's 10 plays of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I picked out the 10 most ridiculous, awful plays of them throwing interceptions and fumbling and getting burned for 50-yard touchdown, you'd say that, well, this football team's awful, but they're the Super Bowl champions because you only watched 10 plays and you didn't have the data. You just had the videotape from 10 plays.
Well, this is why you bring up a great point. Data and specificity have become the enemies of a lot of people nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
They have. So, as always, a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers. You take care of yourself, sir.
Great stuff, David. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right. And we've got another caller on the line. And as you guys have learned, I have hesitated from using the voice recognition of identifying anybody on here, except maybe David has mastered the voice recognition, because it always says David Greenshield. So he's clearly identified, but everybody else, it's a guessing game. So welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hunter from Alabama.
Hey, Hunter. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Good. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Good. Well, I got a question, but I also want to comment a little bit on what the other caller was saying in regards to the NIL. I have a little bit more, I think, and we'll see if you agree with me. I think I have a little bit more of a common sense approach to the whole NIL thing. I think that there should be some restrictions on what kind of deals and endorsement deals that the student athletes can get.
I think there are, but continue.
I'm not sure exactly. I know schools are starting to put parameters on it. And we're gonna. I mean, I don't know exactly what the parameters are on it.
I've heard gambling,
but yeah, and I've heard alcohol. You know, things like that. I mean, the obvious ones. Well, let me ask you this: do you think there should be a cap on how much the student athlete is able to do in endorsement deals?
The capitalist in me says no. I would need to hear an argument for what would be the harm in that. And I think too much money for anybody, there's harm in that potentially. Not that. So when somebody brings up, why is such and such person in America worth $50 billion? They don't need all that money and they should be giving it away. In theory, I understand that. If they're a good person, if they're benevolent, they should be looking after other people and understand that they're in a very fortunate place. But I don't believe that we should restrict them as long as they're making their money legally. And in the same way, unless it could be explained to me what the downfall is, except for just that own person's indulgence in money and greed, I'm apt to think that there should be no cap.
Well, okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to advocate for a cap necessarily. I think what we want to do is to have it to where they're not getting distracted too much by all of that.
Yeah,
Or that doesn't become so overbearing or such a distraction that it takes away from the production on the field.
Who's to determine that? I agree with you. This is going to happen at some point with somebody and with multiple players that, yeah, they're more concerned with their social media deal than they are with hitting the weight room. I completely agree with you, but I don't know who's smart enough to determine the line and to just be able to justify it.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, it's one of those things. Who gets to decide that type of thing? I don't think that there is a good answer. But I think there should be some sort of parameter or some sort of guidelines to where they try to minimize that sort of thing. But I don't know what kind of rule that we could come up with to prevent that really without, you know, being too restrictive. So I think there's a lot of nuance in this, and I think that, you know, it's a very complex conversation and situation.
Of course, there's a salary cap in the NFL and in other sports, but the reason that that's in place is because that's a business trying to make money and trying to determine and control its costs. But this money's coming from the outside world, so it's unlimited, and therefore the teams aren't paying the play. If the teams are paying the players and the schools were paying the players, then I'm sure that there would be a salary cap because they could only afford so much. But since the money's coming from outside the institution, it's unlimited.
Yeah, you're right. Well, okay. Well, let's get to a college football question. Who do you think this year is going to be a team that is going to be in the general perception of people would be that they're let me put it a different way. Who's the team that you think is going to be underrated coming into this football season? And what do you think that team should be able to do as far as production this season.
So when you ask that question, are you talking about a team that we would generally look at as a 7 or 8 win team that could contend for the playoffs, something like that,
or a conference title?
Okay.
For example, I'll give you mine. I think Utah is one of those schools that can have the chance of being really successful this year.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. And if you're talking about the playoff, and the only reason I bring up the playoff is because when is the last time we had a team that competed for the playoff that was unexpected? Really, we haven't. So it would be a breath of fresh air if we had a team that made the playoff that was unexpected. I had somebody tell me today that they looked at something like 25 or 30 different websites and publications to try to find select somebody to make the playoff outside of the 5 teams that we know are going to compete for the playoff. And they found a random Iowa State and a random Texas A&M, and that was it. The rest of it was Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Georgia. So I think Utah is a great selection because they've got a veteran quarterback in Charlie Brewer. They've got a coach who is exceptional and very underrated, and they've got a very tough-minded program that always plays great defense, especially along the defensive front, and has a lot of experience coming back that didn't play a whole lot of football last year. So I think that's a great selection that plays in not a horrible division, but there's not a team that's dominant in that division. So they could certainly be as good, if not better, than USC and Arizona State, who I think are the 2 teams that are most likely to battle them out for the division championship. The team that comes to mind for me, well, would LSU be a surprise if LSU went 11-1?
Okay. I would agree there. It seems like every year though, somehow at some point of the season, usually early in the season, Wisconsin is always one of those teams that is mentioned that could be something. I like their head coach, but they just haven't had an exceptional season since they were in a bowl game a few years back.
Wait a minute. Wisconsin's been the best team in that division. I know that the Northwestern's won the division 2 of the last 3 years, but consistently Wisconsin kind of owns that division. So they've played at a pretty high level of football. In 2017, they came within a touchdown of making the playoff. They were 13-0, and Ohio State beat them 27-21 in the Big Ten championship game. They went to the Rose Bowl 2 years ago and finished in the top 10 in the nation. They've had several seasons where they've lost the Big Ten championship game just because Ohio State's winning all of them. So they've lost to Ohio State, 3 times since 2014 in the conference championship game. I think Wisconsin's going to go 9-3 or 10-2. But they've got Notre Dame at a neutral site out of conference, and they definitely can beat anybody in the Big Ten, and they don't play Ohio State, so they could have a big year.
Yeah, they could. They could. You always have one of those teams like in that conference, like a Purdue or a
Iowa.
One teams like that in that division, in that conference, that seems to always upset one of the good teams, like Ohio State, or pretty close to it.
It's happened twice. Purdue and Iowa back-to-back years beat Ohio State, handed Ohio State its only loss in the Big Ten. So those are the teams.
That year,
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
before this mess started at Arizona State a couple of weeks ago, I don't know how that's going to affect a team. It's difficult to tell. I think that the sooner that the NCAA investigates this and hands down a ruling, the better for Arizona State. Not that they should be taken off the hook, but just better for their recruiting, better to move on with this season, and the players knowing either that they're eligible for postseason play or not. But I think Arizona State would have been a factor in the Pac-12 South and a possible dark horse to get to the Pac-12 championship game. And if you only have one loss, who knows? Maybe to pull off something special. I think North Carolina and Iowa State are the two teams in those two conferences that have the best shot of knocking off the giant Oklahoma, Clemson.
Yeah. Now, refresh my memory. Who was the coach at North Carolina before Mac Brown?
Larry Fedora.
And what did you think about him as a head coach?
Well, he finished just, I don't know what happened there, because just a couple of years prior to him getting fired, they played in the ACC championship game and went 11-2 that year and played within one score of a Clemson team that went to the national championship game. And then they played Baylor in a bowl game in the Russell Athletic Bowl, and they gave up like 1,000,000 yards rushing. Like, seriously, they gave up like 600 yards rushing, and they've always been kind of a soft type team. I don't want to overstate that. I'm not talking about their current team, but they've had some soft teams that were talented. But anyway, and then he continued to recruit well for North Carolina. I'm talking in the teens and high 20s, in that like 18 to 25 range, recruited well enough to win 8 or 9 games a year in a bad division. And for some reason, they just, after Mitch Trubisky and that bunch left, Elijah Hood, Ryan Switzer, that team disintegrated. They had a good run with those players, and then they went 5 and whatever the math is, 5-19 the next 2 years, his last 2 years, and then he got fired, even though he had pretty talented rosters. So I don't know what happened. He couldn't find a quarterback after Trubisky left. That was one issue. They actually played Chaz Surratt at quarterback, who turned out to be the ACC Defensive Player of the Year as a safety. They actually played him at quarterback his first year. So they couldn't find a quarterback. That was one of their big issues his last 2 seasons.
Oh, I thought he was a decent head coach. I mean,
he was having a decent run. He was having a nice run until those last 2 years of 2-10 and 3-9.
Where's he at now?
That's a great question. I thought he went somewhere as a coordinator, somewhere like in the Sun Belt. Maybe I'm confusing him with I thought he went to like Southern Miss as an offensive coordinator. Let me look that up. I don't know for sure.
Really? He went. I mean, I'm not knocking the Sun Belt Conference at all. I love the Troy Trojans, but I just thought that he would have got a little bit better of a job than.
Don't hold me to that. Here we go. He is. As of the end of last season, he was the quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator at Baylor. And I guess he doesn't have a job for this year. He does not.
Nick Saban needs to hire him as an analyst.
Could be.
All right, Mark. Well, I appreciate it. I don't know how you keep all this knowledge straightened out.
And you know what? That knowledge, Hunter, gets confused. You know why I had Southern Miss on my brain? He was at Southern Miss before he went to North Carolina. That's why I had Southern Miss on the brain. But I appreciate it, Hunter.
Yeah. Speaking of Southern Miss, I just got to mention this right quick before I go. I think that I got the experience of one of the most exciting plays that's happened since in my lifetime, at least. I'm only 25 years old, so say that for what it is. But I was there at the Alabama and Southern Miss game when the pro throw catch happened.
Oh,
And
yes. Oh,
I
my
remember
goodness.
that
Yeah.
as a little kid.
Trapping the ball on the defensive
my
back's back. Yeah. That was crazy. Yep.
my uncle, my step uncle, he coached at Southern Miss at the time, and so we always got to go to all the games and stuff. And I remember as a little kid. Matter of fact, my dad was in the stands with an Alabama shirt on and a Southern Miss hat on. So it was that was one of my favorite memories of college football.
I know.
In there for that.
Yeah.
So since you brought Southern Miss up, I just had to mention
No,
that.
that's cool. When you talk about Southern Miss, I worked in Mississippi covering Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Alabama for about 7 years, and Southern Miss wasn't a team that we would cover necessarily in terms of going to the games, but we would get their news conferences and we would still cover them because we were in Mississippi. And it was either the second or third game I ever saw at Bryant-Denny Stadium was against Southern Miss. The day that I got the job, and it was my first football Saturday, actually Alabama was playing Vandy. And it was just kind of awkward, or not awkward. It was just kind of strange thinking about it now, because Alabama in the years that I was there would play Southern Miss on a fairly regular basis, and they wouldn't destroy them. They had those teams with Jay Barker and Freddie Kitchens at quarterback and Andrew Zhao, and they would win these games like 17-6, 14-6, against Southern Miss and Vandy. The first Vandy game that I saw at Alabama, Bama barely beat them. Like, it was the type game that you knew Alabama wasn't going to let go. Their defense was too good, but they only won by like 8 points, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, that was such a cool experience.
Oh yeah, I bet.
One of those childhood memories that I have. So. All right. Well, thank you for taking my call.
Thanks, Hunter. Have a good night. All right, everyone. I think we will wrap it up here. Hopefully, I've not missed any comments or questions coming in. I was going to make the announcement, as was indicated on the title of the live stream tonight. So what I do is I know that I'm going to have a call-in show, and you guys are going to dictate what we talk about, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But I typically like to come up with a topic to draw some people in, or at least have something to talk about that just in case we don't get too many calls or whatever the case might be, or to launch the conversation. So tonight I'm going to announce, and maybe I'll post a video on this as well. I'm going to announce that the opening week of the college football season, once I spit this out, I'm committed to it. It's going to be out there, so I'm going to have to follow through on my words. The opening weekend of the college football season, whether that be week 0, but I'm trending toward week 1, because we're going to have legitimate, really good games on Thursday and Friday that I'm not going to do at week 0. Week 0 is highlighted by Nebraska and Illinois, I think, is the best game, maybe UCLA and Hawaii. So week 1 is really when college football launches. Yeah, I've thought about doing this for years and years and years, so we're going to do it this year. I don't know how I'm going to hold up, or how we're going to fill the time, or how we're going to do it, but I think I've got a strategy on when to do it. We're going to go live for 24 hours straight. There, I said it. 24 hours straight, college football coverage, live stream, calls, comments, all of it, 24 consecutive hours. We're going to be here covering college football. I've wanted to do this for a number of years, but I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to hold up and do that. But some way we're going to make it through 24 consecutive hours. I may have to have somebody come in here and take the reins once in a while or something. I don't know. I'm stupid enough to think that I can pull it off without that. 24 consecutive hours. And my thought process is, okay, there are going to be games on that Thursday night, highlighted by Ohio State and Minnesota and a few other games that will come on after the games. And obviously, we'll want to talk to all of you after the games. And that usually takes us to, let's say, 2 a.m. And then I'll want to crash and be ready for Friday. So if we go to 2 a.m, that means to be on for 24 consecutive hours, I'm going to have to be on starting at 2 a.m. the night before. So that is the plan right now. 2 a.m. Wednesday night, Thursday morning to 2 a.m. Thursday night, Friday morning on the opening weekend of college football on that Wednesday/Thursday into Friday, 24 consecutive hours of college football coverage right here. All right. And then we've got other announcements coming in the next several weeks concerning our college football coverage in season as well. So thank you so much, Moonbot, Mike Williams, for your super chat contributions. There might have been somebody else in there. I apologize if I missed somebody. I acknowledged everybody at the time, but I like to recap with that as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Continue to lock it in here. We will have all sorts of coverage coming your way throughout the weekend and into, I don't know if I'm going to go live this weekend because we've got a lot of work to do, but definitely back on Monday with a live show on Monday. But you never know if something happens like JTT announced last Sunday. And I made it back in town, and we did a live stream with JTT coverage, and that really worked out well with over 11,000 views on that. So that's good stuff. So again, thank you everyone for supporting. Go to Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Search Mark Rogers TV to contribute right there. And we will see you next time. Have a good night. God bless.